Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we travel to a different time, one stitched together with soot and steam, wooden wheels and waking dreams. It's early morning in America, somewhere between 1900 and 1910, and the cities are stretching their limbs. The air tastes like coal and coffee, thick with the scent of horse dung and bakery bread. Chimneys puff their tired breath into the grey-blue sky while pigeons shuffle nervously on window ledges. A lone rooster crows, rather optimistically above the mechanical hiss of a passing streetcar. And just a heads up, if you think you're ready for life back then, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere out in the world, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always a treat to see where and when we all drift together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first stirrings of the day aren't gentle. They rattle, they clank. Somewhere in a 6-story tenement in New York City's Lower East Side, a baby begins to wail. The cry echoes down the hall, mixing with the slam of a door and the harsh voice of a mother trying to dress 3 children with one hand while frying salt pork with the other. The floorboards creak above her, and a neighbour's cough begins its daily routine, wet and wheezy and probably not improving. Outside, the streets are already moving. Horses clip-clop on cobblestone, pulling milk wagons and ice carts. The milkman, eyes barely open, heaves tin containers from house to house, careful not to spill. The iceman follows shortly after, chipping blocks from the back of his wagon. Iceboxes groan under their breath, grateful for another day of slow melting. A paperboy, hat askew and nose red from the cold, yells headlines with more drama than clarity. Taft takes office, says trust beware, he shouts, though most people passing by don't stop. They're already late, always late. At the corner, a factory whistle screams into the morning air like a metal banshee, its sound bouncing between brick walls. It's not a gentle nudge, it's a command. The workers must arrive on time, or not at all. 1 minute late means docked wages. 2 minutes? The door might already be bolted shut, so they hurry. Women in shirtwaists and long skirts shuffle past men in suspenders and newsboy caps, their steps quick and their faces blank. Some carry tin lunch pails, others just bread wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. Their boots are heavy, worn and patched. A few men wear suits, but they are not tailored. They are tired. A cigar dangles from one mouth, unlit, just something to chew on. Steam rises from the grates on the sidewalks. It mingles with the breath of passers-by and the exhaust of early automobiles, those sputtering, jerky contraptions that still seem unsure of themselves. Most people still walk or take the streetcar, or they simply hitch a ride if they're lucky enough to find a free space on the back of a carriage. 100 miles away, in a quiet Pennsylvania village, the morning arrives differently, slower. Still wrapped in mist and dew, the farmland is silent except for the cooing of doves and the distant bark of a dog. A boy throws open the barn doors, bucket in hand, and trudges toward the cow. He's 10 years old, maybe, and his breath clouds in the cold. He milks in silence, one hand numb and the other aching from a poor night's sleep. School comes later, if he finishes his chores. Back in the city, a chimney sweep, no older than 13, clambers up the side of a building, black soot already smearing his face like war paint. He whistles as he works, not because he's happy, but because it keeps the pigeons away. Below him, a coal delivery man tips a wheelbarrow and curses under his breath as the black dust coats his boots. Down the alley, behind the bakery, a cook flips sausages over a fire that's too hot for the pan and too small for the demand. The bread is already rising. Thick loaves dusted in flour, crusty and full of hope. But hope is in short supply. Historians still argue whether mornings in 1905 were busier than they are today, but one thing's clear. They were louder, harder, and far less forgiving. Alarm clocks were mechanical, if they existed at all, and sleep was a luxury many couldn't afford. There were no smartphones, no podcasts, no protein smoothies, just cold water, cracked soap, and maybe, if you were lucky, a splash of milk in your coffee. That is, if you had coffee. In Savannah, Georgia, morning means swatting away mosquitoes and stepping out onto the porch in bare feet. The wood still damp from the previous night's storm. A woman in a gingham dress hangs laundry while her husband inspects the fence. It needs fixing. Everything needs fixing. In Chicago, a dock worker rolls a cigarette with trembling hands and watches a tugboat pull into the harbour. Somewhere inside that boat is a crate of oranges, and for a brief second he wonders what it might feel like to eat one every day. Citrus is still a novelty, and vitamins are a mystery. Scurvy hasn't disappeared, it's just unfashionable to mention. Elsewhere, in the high desert of New Mexico, a young woman sweeps the porch of a one-room schoolhouse. She's the teacher, barely 20, and she boards with a local family. Her breakfast was a dry biscuit and strong coffee laced with grit. Today she'll teach 12 children, some of whom rode 5 miles on horseback just to spell Providence on a slate board. Her dress is homemade, her shoes too tight, and her chalk barely lasts the week. Quirky fact for your dreams tonight. In 1903, the US government employed post office cats. No joke. Their official title was Mouser, and they were assigned to postal facilities to deal with rats. Some were paid in food rations, others got nothing. A tough labour market, even for felines, but not everyone is working. Somewhere in an upper-crust neighbourhood in Boston, a maid draws back silk curtains in a 4-storey mansion while the lady of the house stretches beneath layers of imported wool. Her breakfast will be served on porcelain, eggs poached, not fried, and her newspaper ironed, yes, ironed, so the ink doesn't smudge her gloves. Outside, a carriage waits. She's late for a charity meeting that will likely end in gossip and fruitcake. A few blocks away, a man with a top hat climbs into a private coach, nodding briskly to the driver. He's heading to the bank, his bank, and will spend the morning worrying about other people's money while sipping fine tea. He smells like bay rum and leather, and unlike most, he has a bathroom with a flush toilet. Scandalous! By 10 o'clock, the city is in full swing. Street vendors shout offers of pickled eggs and roasted peanuts. A man selling snake oil claims to have the cure for baldness, colic and heartbreak. Children run barefoot through puddles of things better left unidentified, and a preacher on the corner warns of fire and brimstone which, on a hot day, doesn't feel like much of a threat. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat watches it all from the steps of a library. She's reading a novel with racy ideas, something about a woman who wants to vote. People glance disapprovingly, but she doesn't care. Or maybe she does. It's hard to tell with women in hats. And still the factories belch smoke into the sky. The air grows thicker by the hour. Workers, hunched and grimy, pause only briefly for meals. There's no such thing as a lunch break, only time to chew something quickly and try not to lose a finger in the machines afterward. And yet, life goes on. Somehow. People fall in love on grimy street corners, swap stories in barbershops, and whisper secrets behind clotheslines. Babies are born above bakeries, horses collapse in the streets, the new tenement catches fire every other day, and yet someone always plays a violin near sunset, like the city itself is trying to remember what beauty sounds like. The sun climbs higher, the streets grow louder, the day marches forward with soot on its collar and calluses on its feet. And still, America wakes. The sun has now fully asserted itself, slanting down through smoky skies and filtering across dusty windowsills, crawling over the backs of people already halfway through their day. In cities like Philadelphia and Cincinnati, homes lean into one another like weary neighbours. They're row houses, narrow and deep, built from red brick and stacked close enough that a sneeze in one might earn a bless you from the next. Inside, these homes hum with the quiet chaos of morning routines. Children fight over the last slice of bread. A grandmother mutters prayers in a language that isn't English, clutching her rosary with one hand and stirring porridge with the other. Porridge again, always porridge. If you're lucky, maybe a few raisins. If you're not, well, there's always lard to spread on stale crusts. One little girl eyes a mouse darting across the floor, casually naming it like it's a roommate, because in a way it is. The tenements creak and sigh. Walls are so thin you can hear your neighbours breathe. Some families hang blankets between rooms for a bit of privacy. Others simply resign themselves to the knowledge that nothing, no thought, no whisper, is ever truly their own. Most families crowd into 2 or 3 rooms, though the actual head count can exceed a dozen. Boarders are common. A travelling cousin from the old country, a widow from upstairs who pays in needlework, a young man looking for factory work, sleeping on a cot that folds up against the wall. Beds are rarely empty. They're handed off between shifts. Father gets the mattress after the night shift. Son claims it before school. Mother only gets to rest when no one else is home. Bathrooms. If you're picturing porcelain thrones and a faint smell of lavender, bless your heart. Most urban homes rely on outhouses or shared hallway privies, and indoor plumbing is a status symbol. Bathing happens in basins or tin tubs dragged into the kitchen and filled from the stove. Once a week, maybe. And always in order, eldest to youngest, because no one wants to be the fifth body in a tub of already cloudy water. A young boy ties a rope to his tooth and slams a cupboard door. Dentistry isn't exactly thriving at this level of income. Parents inspect scalps for lice and feet for frostbite. Girls pin up their hair with fingers that ache from yesterday's factory work, and no one talks too loudly, because Mr. Karczak downstairs works nights, and if you wake him up again, he swears he'll throw his boot through the ceiling. The walls are papered with newspapers, both for decoration and insulation. Some people scrawl prayers in chalk near the doorframe. Others hang photographs of relatives back in Ireland, Italy, Poland, wherever home once was. And always, somewhere in the corner, a crucifix hangs crookedly, watching it all without blinking. In more rural areas, the houses are larger but colder. A family in Ohio lives in a farmhouse with sagging porches and an outhouse that tips a bit to the left. Their floor is bare wood, swept daily but forever dusty. The father has calloused hands from splitting firewood and a back that protests every morning. The mother wears a calico dress patched so many times it's more quilt than garment. Her morning began at 4:30 a.m, lighting the stove and collecting eggs before the rooster even had the decency to crow. Windows are covered with muslin or old quilts nailed into place. There's a potbelly stove in the centre of the room, its pipe snaking into the ceiling. When it's lit, the entire family crowds around it like moths, hands extended, feet tucked beneath themselves for warmth. The stove burns coal, which they ration carefully, because winter is long and money is short. In wealthier homes, the rare ones with servants and drawing rooms, the furniture is heavy and dark, made from mahogany or walnut, layered with lace doilies and proud porcelain figurines. Chandeliers sway slightly when someone walks across the hall. Gas lamps hiss softly. The children here have their own rooms, their own toys, even their own governesses. They eat breakfast from polished silver, oatmeal, yes, but with cinnamon and milk. Maybe a sliced peach from a can. The house smells faintly of beeswax and starch. But even in luxury, quirks persist. One eccentric household in Newport, Rhode Island, built a lavish indoor fountain, but used it to bathe their dog. Meanwhile, upstairs, the mistress of the house installed a speaking tube to yell down to the kitchen when the tea was late. Historians still argue whether such features were born from ingenuity or pure vanity. Back in the city, the buildings groan under their own weight. Paint peels like sunburn. Pipes hiss, rats scurry, and the ceiling leaks in 3 places. Still, there's a rhythm to it. A strange, unspoken choreography. Children jump rope in the alleys. Someone plucks a banjo on the stoop. A woman yells at her husband in Yiddish, and the man next door chuckles because, though he doesn't understand the words, the tone is universal. Some apartments double as workplaces. One mother mends dresses while her baby naps in a drawer. Another presses flowers into scrapbooks for sale. A man assembles cigars at the kitchen table, his fingers yellowed, his lungs already beginning to wheeze. There's a quiet desperation in every room, but also an odd sense of pride. These homes might be falling apart, but they're fiercely loved. A strange tidbit. One 1907 invention attempted to solve overcrowded housing with rotating beds, a mechanical contraption that stacked multiple cots in a wheel and rotated them out when needed. Think bunk beds meets Ferris wheel. Unsurprisingly, the idea never quite caught on. Meanwhile, behind many homes, outhouses bake under the sun. They're communal in some neighbourhoods, and people develop a sort of passive-aggressive system for usage. A girl named Clara once waited 2 full hours because Mrs. Feldman brought a newspaper and a stubborn constitution. It's not all bad, though. At least the privy offers a few minutes of peace, unless it's summer, when flies declare war. In immigrant neighbourhoods, smells are louder than words. Garlic, onions, cabbage, fish, all boiling in crowded kitchens, mingling into a perfume that newcomers find either intoxicating or intolerable. One man sniffs and mutters, "Smells like home." His friend replies, "Smells like a dare." They both laugh and keep walking, and yet, despite the crowding and the smells and the infinite chorus of crying babies, people make it work. They share, they barter, they lend sugar and borrow time, they nurse each other's children. They offer condolences through thin walls and celebrate weddings with fiddles and stomping feet. Home isn't just a place, it's a pattern, a repetition of rituals that mean we're still here, but comfort is not evenly distributed. African American families in the South face a different reality, one shaped by segregation and scarcity. Their homes are often made from wood planks, heated by fireplaces that barely touch the cold. They live under Jim Crow's shadow, and while their mornings begin with song and prayer, they are also touched by constant watchfulness. Children are taught to speak quietly in public, to avoid eye contact with white neighbours, to never wander too far. Some families build hidden compartments in walls to store books, because in certain counties, even education is a risk. And yet, within these homes, there is joy. Music, always. A harmonica by the hearth. Quilts stitched from memory. Stories whispered at night, some true, some half-true, all stitched with hope. A mainstream historical fact. In 1900, the US Census recorded that over 18% of American homes were considered overcrowded, meaning more than one person per room. In immigrant-heavy neighbourhoods like New York's Five Points, that number often exceeded 50%. Overcrowding wasn't just a statistic, it was a lifestyle. As the day creeps toward noon, the homes begin to empty. Children go off to school, fathers to factories, mothers to markets. The home becomes quieter, its heartbeat slower, but never still. A cat stretches on a windowsill. A clock ticks with dusty dignity. Somewhere, a wind chime tinkles, catching a breeze that smells faintly of fish and kerosene. And yet, beneath every roof, whether leaking or grand, crowded or silent, one truth persists. The home is the centre of gravity. It holds together the chaos. It collects the crumbs and memories. It's the last thing people see at night and the first thing they pray survives till morning. Because in 1905, homes aren't just shelters. They're battlefields. They're sanctuaries. They're the walls that remember. It's nearing lunchtime in early 1900s America, but don't expect anything remotely resembling avocado toast or pre-packaged granola bars. What's for breakfast? Not much, and certainly not exciting. The average kitchen, especially in working-class homes, is a battleground of scarcity, creativity, and a daily game of guess the expiration date. The morning meal is more about survival than satisfaction. In the cramped kitchen of a three-room tenement, a woman in a grease-spotted apron scrapes the bottom of a flour bin. Her hands move quickly, expertly. Part habit, part hope. She stirs up a thick mush of flour, water and lard, fried into stiff cakes in a cast-iron pan that hasn't seen soap in weeks. The cakes taste like salt and desperation, but they're warm, and in winter, that's halfway to heaven. Across the alley, another family starts their day with cold beans from the night before, mashed and spread on bread that's gone tough around the edges. The children chew slowly, not because they savour it, but because chewing makes it last longer. One girl hides half her portion in a napkin. She'll give it to her little brother later when he gets home from his paper route. In more rural areas, the fare isn't much better, but at least the ingredients are fresher. Chickens out back, potatoes in a bin, maybe a little milk if the cow cooperated that morning. A farmhand in Iowa slices a hunk of last night's pork shoulder and fries it alongside leftover cornbread. He dunks the dry crumbs in strong black coffee, more for softening than flavour. Coffee is brewed from grounds used once, sometimes twice, then dried on the windowsill for reuse. You don't throw out coffee, you wring every drop from it, twice. Mainstream fact of the day. By 1900, refrigeration was still a rare luxury. Ice boxes, the wooden ancestors of modern fridges, relied on blocks of ice delivered by the iceman and lasted only as long as the weather cooperated. Spoilage was a daily concern, and meat turned fast, especially in summer, milk soured in hours. Fresh was a relative term. That's why so much of breakfast relied on preserved or shelf-stable foods. Salted meats, dried beans, hard cheeses. Sugar was expensive, so most kids' cereal was more likely to be dry bread or cracked wheat boiled into porridge. For a special treat, a drizzle of molasses might be added. More often, it was just lard or gravy. But don't let that word gravy fool you. This isn't the silky brown sauce your grandma might pour over a roast. This is more akin to grease water, flour browned in pan drippings with maybe a pinch of salt. Some called it sawmill gravy. Others called it something hot to eat. Either way, it clung to the roof of your mouth and your ribs alike. Children didn't complain, not out loud anyway. They knew there was nothing else. A child in Kentucky dipped stale cornmeal cakes into bacon fat, licking the grease from her fingers with the reverence of someone who knows how rare it is. Her younger brother is gnawing on a raw onion, which he claims is good for keeping colds away. Whether or not it works, it's at least pungent enough to make people keep their distance. In wealthier homes, the breakfast table tells a very different story. A maid in a starched uniform sets out china plates and sterling cutlery. Toasted bread sits beneath a linen napkin to stay warm. Poached eggs gleam with butter. Sausages smell faintly of sage. And there's jam, actual jam, made from berries and sugar, not the boiled apple peels many poor families pass off as preserves. The man of the house drinks his coffee, black and bitter. Scanning the morning paper, the woman nibbles at a slice of sponge cake, pretending not to notice that the cook has reused yesterday's pastries. The children fuss with their silver spoons, dismayed to find oatmeal once again. One of them sighs and asks for cocoa. He gets it. Of course he does. But even in well-appointed kitchens, quirks abound. One Boston aristocrat insisted on a single boiled egg served in a silver cup with its cap removed perfectly straight. Any deviation, and breakfast was cancelled. Historians still argue whether she was eccentric or simply an innovator in personal boundaries. Meanwhile, in the kitchens of immigrants, breakfast is a fusion of old country recipes and New World ingredients. In a Jewish household on the Lower East Side, a mother serves herring on dark bread with pickled onions. In a Sicilian family upstairs, leftover polenta is fried into crisp cakes, served with black coffee sweetened with sugar cubes, stolen from the bakery where the son works. Fringe fact for flavour. In 1901, one Midwestern homemaker's guidebook suggested boiling dandelion roots as a coffee substitute. Not because it tasted good, it didn't, but because it was free and contained bitterness enough to fool the tongue. That's the culinary bar we're working with here. Let's not forget the logistics. Most kitchens were dim, often windowless, with low ceilings and poor ventilation. Cooking meant heat, smoke, and sweat. Even in January. The stove ran on wood or coal, both of which had to be fetched, stored and managed. There was no preheat to 375. The flame was either too high or too low. Women learned to tell oven temperature by sticking their arm inside. No thermometers, just instincts and singed hairs. Pots were heavy, utensils bent under pressure, dishes chipped easily, but nobody threw them out. You glued that plate. You learned to live with a fork that leaned slightly left. Waste was a luxury. On rare occasions, something sweet might grace the morning table. In rural homes, this meant apple fritters or syrup poured over biscuits. In cities, a few lucky children might get penny candy from a corner shop, eaten quietly before the rest of the house woke up. For most, however, sugar was rationed for special occasions, birthdays, weddings, or church socials where store-bought cake was displayed like royalty. As the morning wears on, the meal ends not with satisfaction, but with resolve. Plates are stacked, crumbs brushed away, leftovers carefully wrapped in paper or cheesecloth. Dishwater is poured down the drain, or out the back window if no sink exists. The kitchen is wiped, swept, and left to await its next battle. A few women linger, sipping the last of the coffee grounds. Their hands rest briefly in their laps, red from scrubbing, rough from labour. For 5 minutes, maybe 10, they stare out the window at the laundry swaying on the line. Somewhere across the alley another woman does the same. They don't wave, but they see each other. And across town, in a tiny apartment above a butcher shop, an old man cracks 3 raw eggs into a tin cup and downs them in one gulp. He claims it keeps him strong. It's what Teddy Roosevelt would do, he mutters. Whether or not that's true, no one dares question it. He's 83, has never missed a day of work, and can still arm wrestle anyone under 30. Meanwhile, in Oklahoma Territory, a settler family finishes their meal with a prayer and prepares to ride out into the plains. Their breakfast was wild rabbit and hominy, caught, skinned, and soaked by hand. The mother tucks a chunk of bread into her apron for later. The children laugh as they swing up onto the wagon, but the father's eyes scan the sky. Storm clouds. Always watching for storm clouds. For African American families in the South, breakfast carries layers of tradition and burden. Cornbread and collard greens, when available, are boiled in iron pots passed down for generations. The food is seasoned not just with salt, but with memory. Recipes were born in kitchens where choice didn't exist, where scraps were made sacred. And still, the meals feed more than the body. They nourish dignity, identity, the quiet rebellion of surviving with flavour intact. In boarding houses, breakfast is a group affair. Grumbling stomachs gathering in a shared dining room. Coffee is poured from dented kettles, grits scraped from the pot. A travelling salesman dips hardtack into his mug, while two factory girls whisper about a co-worker who fainted yesterday. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. They pulled their change to buy him a roll. He cried, said it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. And in schoolyards, as the morning bell nears, a boy unwraps a single cold potato from a cloth. It's his entire meal. He bites into it slowly, methodically, pretending it's something else. His friend offers a bit of salt pinched from his own pocket. It's a tiny gesture, but it matters. The truth is, breakfast in early 1900s America isn't romantic. It's gritty, lean, and often unsatisfying, but it's also revealing. It shows who has plenty and who makes do. It's a quiet testimony to resilience, the daily decision to rise, to cook, to feed, even when the cupboard is nearly bare. And tomorrow, it all begins again. The same scrape of the pot, the same hiss of the stove, the same prayer, whispered over steaming porridge or crusty bread. Let this be enough. By mid-morning, the real grind begins, not metaphorically, but quite literally. The grind of gears, the grind of wheat, the grind of tired feet on factory floors and muddy fields. This is the true heartbeat of early 20th century America. Work. Endless, aching, dirty work. Whether you're in a smoke-belching factory, a frostbitten cornfield, or bent over in a sewing sweatshop, the day doesn't really begin until you're clocked in, sleeves rolled, and sweating by the bucketful. In cities like Pittsburgh and Detroit, the factories are cathedrals of labour, tall brick buildings with soot-streaked windows and chimneys that cough into the sky like dying dragons. They buzz before sunrise and groan well after sunset. Inside, the air is thick, hot in summer, freezing in winter, and always reeking of oil, coal, and metal filings. Every surface is either sharp or slick, and everything that moves seems one mistake away from removing a finger. Men march in, lunch pails clutched in blackened hands. Some women walk alongside them, tied hair and tired eyes, dressed in long skirts and high collars that offer no comfort but maximum chafing. There's no small talk, just a resigned shuffle. They've done this before, they'll do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. Once inside, the rhythm of work takes over. A foreman barks orders, a whistle shrieks, and machines lurch to life. Pistons pump, belts whir, steam hisses like angry snakes. A single machine operator might pull a lever 3,000 times in a day. That's not exaggeration. It's documented muscle memory. Over and over, day after day, until their arms ache in places they didn't know they had. Children are here too. 12-year-olds, 9-year-olds, even 7-year-olds in some cases, especially in textile mills and coal mines. Their small hands are just the right size to fix jams in moving machinery, an asset no one celebrates out loud. They earn half wages for full days, their bones still soft, their lungs already hardening with dust. They don't get sick days, they barely get school, one fringe tidbit. In 1904, a factory in Massachusetts was cited for having too many barefoot children on the premises. The official concern wasn't safety, it was appearance. Bare feet made investors nervous. Meanwhile, in the meatpacking districts of Chicago, things are somehow even worse. The factories reek of blood and bleach, the air humid with steam and the occasional unidentifiable stench. Workers wade through guts and bones, slipping on the floor, dodging hooks that swing from above like meaty pendulums. The job isn't just dangerous, it's surreal. One man severs pig heads for 10 hours straight. Another spends 8 hours defeathering chickens, losing the feeling in his fingers from scalding water and repetition. Historians still argue whether meatpacking or mining was more dangerous during this time. Each had its own brand of horror. The only certainty is that nobody doing either job came home clean. Further west, out in the vast Midwest and Southern Plains, farmers rise early and break their backs from sunrise to sunset. Ploughs dig through rock-hard dirt. Mules groan beneath harnesses. Calluses form on top of calluses. The rhythm of the field is slower but no less brutal. There's no whistle to tell you when to stop. Just the sun burning overhead, and the ache in your spine telling you you've done enough, though you'll still do more. Sharecroppers, many of them black families or poor whites, work under the crushing weight of debt harvesting cotton or tobacco they'll never truly profit from. They live in wooden shacks, tend fields they don't own, and watch their hard work flow straight into someone else's pocket. The children work too, picking weeds, gathering kindling, keeping the chickens from eating the seedlings. There's no romanticism in farm labour at this point in time. The American farmer isn't the flannel-shirted icon of vintage postcards. He's hunched, sunburned, and watching the sky like it owes him money. Out on the railroads, men swing hammers on steel tracks that stretch for miles. The clang of metal echoes through the valleys, a kind of industrial music only they understand. Chinese and Irish labourers make up a good portion of these crews, many of them facing harsh discrimination and even harsher working conditions. One slip, one misstep, and they're under a train or off a cliff. They're paid pennies, they're fed worse, and yet the trains run. Always. Then there are the coal miners, underground men in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky. They wake before dawn, descend into blackness, and spend the day in air too thick to breathe and too dry to cough. They crawl through tunnels the size of coffins, swinging pickaxes by candlelight. The walls groan, the ceilings weep. Gas pockets explode without warning, but the job pays barely. And if you're lucky, you make it home with both lungs and all your limbs. One miner keeps a canary in a cage. It's not a pet, it's a warning system. If the bird keels over, it means the air's gone bad. There's no science behind it, just instinct and folklore, but it works most of the time. In sweatshops, rows of women and girls sit hunched at sewing machines. Their feet pump pedals in rhythm. Their fingers move like spider legs, threading, stitching, snipping. The light is poor, the air stale, and the noise, an unending clatter of metal and muttered curses. They earn by the piece, not by the hour, so every mistake is a paycheck cut short. A girl named Lillian is 13. She's been working since she was 9. Today she finishes 127 buttonholes. Tomorrow she'll aim for 140. Her reward? Maybe a nickel more, maybe not, if her boss is feeling generous. Yet, even in all this hardship, there's resilience, humour, humanity. In one factory, the workers invent an unofficial morning anthem sung off-key while cleaning their tools. In another, a man carves initials into a beam above his station. Every worker who survives a full year gets to add theirs. The beam is full now. People say it brings luck. Others call it defiance. Let's shift just briefly to the odd jobs. The hustlers, the self-employed. A one-eyed organ grinder on a Boston street corner plays the same 3 songs every day. His monkey wears a hat and collects coins with a tiny tin cup. A woman in Kansas City runs a pie cart. Apple, cherry, and something she swears is rhubarb but suspiciously tastes like turnip. She sells out by noon, pockets jingling. There's a man who shines shoes outside the post office. Another who sells patent medicine out of a briefcase, promising to cure everything from toothache to heartbreak. A boy with a bucket scrub steps for nickels. A girl with a bell offers to fetch groceries for ladies of refinement. The job market is vast, but most of it isn't listed anywhere. You hustle. You guess. You hope the man hiring that morning picks you out of the line. If not, you try again tomorrow, or the next day, or not at all. Among domestic workers, maids, laundresses, cooks and nannies, the hours are endless, the expectations absurd. One housemaid rises before her employers, cleans 5 rooms, serves breakfast, polishes silver, and stands at attention for the lunch bell. She might get Thursday afternoon off, or not. She sleeps in a closet with a cot and a chamber pot. But she has a roof. She has tea when there's extra, that's something. And then there are the prostitutes, let's be honest, they exist in every city, and work under conditions no less gruelling than any factory. In the red light districts of San Francisco or New Orleans, they ply their trade behind velvet curtains or in shabby upstairs rooms. Some have protection, most don't. Some choose it, most don't. But the money when it comes is more than they'd make cleaning shoes or sewing sleeves. Society looks away, but never too far. There's no labour law worth mentioning, no OSHA, no sick leave, no pensions. Unions are sprouting up, but they're fragile, often crushed by force or bribery. Still, workers begin to organise, they whisper about strikes. about rights, about better wages and fewer hours. They pin red ribbons to their coats. They share leaflets behind the foreman's back. Mainstream fact. The average workday in 1905 was 10 to 12 hours long, 6 days a week. In many industries, the Sunday day off was unpaid, and labour laws protecting children wouldn't be passed nationally until the 1930s. So why do they do it? Why keep working, keep waking up, keep pulling the same lever, picking the same crop, stitching the same hem? Because there are mouths to feed, because rent is due, because the American dream isn't a promise, it's bait, and everyone is chasing it. And so, from sea to shining sea, the sound of labour rises, a clamour, a rhythm, a national anthem without music, the clatter of looms, the hiss of steam, the grunt of men under weight, the slap of boots on floorboards, the rustle of pay envelopes thinner than hoped, and through it all, the people work. As the clock inches toward noon, the machinery of America grinds on, but stomachs grow louder than steam whistles. It's lunchtime across the land, though for most, the word lunch is a bit generous. There's no curated salad or sandwich shop, no lunch breaks with sunlit benches and carefully portioned plastic containers. In the early 1900s, lunch is a pause, not a pleasure. It's quick, often cold, and almost always eaten in the same place you work. Let's start in the factory. The whistle screeches at 12, not as a courtesy, but as a command. The machines don't stop for kindness, they stop because they'll overheat otherwise. Workers have anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the boss and the day. They retreat to corners of greasy floors, to locker rooms if they're lucky, to stairwells and alleys if they're not. They don't wash their hands, not when there's no soap, no sink, and certainly no time. From tin pails and bundled rags the lunch appears, yesterday's bread, maybe a boiled egg. If there's meat, it's likely salt pork or a dried sausage that has seen better months. Cheese, when available, comes hard enough to knock a nail in. An apple? Only if someone had a lucky trip to the market or snagged one fallen from a cart. Soup? Only if you live close enough to home for someone to deliver it hot, and even then it's probably more broth than substance. A young boy, sitting cross-legged on the shop floor, unwraps a sandwich made from mustard and cabbage between 2 slices of dark rye. His friend eyes it with envy. His own lunch is just a heel of bread and a sliver of lard. They swap bites without speaking, a silent contract born of hunger and friendship. Women working in textile mills often eat standing up between machines, one hand on a sandwich and the other still adjusting thread. Time is money. And in many places the whistle doesn't blow for women at all. They eat on the go, or not at all. Some tuck bites in when the foreman looks away. Others chew while walking to the restroom and back. A few tuck crusts into apron pockets for later. Mainstream fact. In 1904, the average daily wage for a factory worker was about $1.50. Buying a hot lunch, even one costing a nickel or dime, was seen as a luxury many couldn't afford. So most carried their own food, whatever could be salvaged from last night's supper or begged from a neighbour. Street food, however, offers a bit of hope for the hungry and the rushed. In cities like New York, vendors cluster near factory gates and streetcar stops, calling out in dozens of accents. Hot niches, tamales wrapped in paper, roasted chestnuts, pickles from wooden barrels, pretzels warm and salty, even oyster sandwiches, all available for a few cents. Some offer coffee so thick a spoon can stand in it. Others dish out dubious meat pies that taste vaguely of ambition and regret. One quirky fringe item. Cat meat sandwiches. Not actually made of cats, probably, but sold by a few especially bold vendors who earned the name for their questionable meat sources. Historians still debate whether these sandwiches were satire, scam, or just depressingly honest. In coal mining towns, lunch is often eaten underground in the dark. Miners sit in dusty side shafts, lamps flickering, pulling cold biscuits from tin lunchboxes. If they're lucky, there's leftover bacon. If not, just molasses or beans. They chew fast, listening for creaks in the rock above. There's no second helpings in a mine. Just a quick bite, a deep breath, and then back to swinging picks or hauling carts. On farms, the work doesn't pause at noon. It just shifts rhythm. A farmer swipes sweat from his brow, leans on a shovel and opens a wrapped package from his wife. Cornbread, a cold potato, a hard-boiled egg. He eats, standing in the field, the sun baking his neck. His children, too small to handle ploughs but big enough to chase chickens, Eat under a tree with jam sandwiches and milk. The jam is mostly sugar, the milk is slightly sour, but nobody complains. In the south, sharecroppers gather under trees when they can, crouching low with mason jars of beans or stewed greens. The land is dry, the shade is thin, and the food is sparse. One woman serves a pot of fatback and rice, scooped with wooden spoons and shared from a communal dish. The taste is smoky, salty, and somehow comforting. In that moment, it's not about fullness, it's about fortitude. In wealthier homes, lunch is an entirely different affair. Served at 1 o'clock, sometimes 2, it involves courses: soup, salad, meat, and dessert. A young socialite in Chicago nibbles on cold chicken and asparagus while discussing the latest scandal at the opera. Her mother adjusts the table linens, dismayed at the way the butler poured the lemonade. The cook brings out a custard tart that wobbles perfectly. Everyone pretends to eat sparingly, while the kitchen maid sneaks scraps for her supper later. At boarding schools and colleges, students sit in long rows, eating institutional meals on tin trays. Some schools serve beef stew, watery and overloaded with potatoes. Others offer boiled cabbage or turnip hash. The meals are usually dull but filling. A clever student might smuggle salt or vinegar to add flavour. Most simply chew and hope dessert includes something more exciting than prune pudding. In small towns, the general store doubles as a lunch spot. You can get a slice of bologna on bread, a pickle from a barrel, and a sarsaparilla from a dusty bottle. You eat standing, chatting with the clerk about the weather and the price of flour. A few stores install lunch counters with stools, offering blue plate specials for 30 cents. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, string beans, and a roll, all drowning in gravy the consistency of wallpaper paste. But it's warm, it's fast, and it beats a raw onion. Open scholarly debate. Historians still debate how common it really was for children to skip lunch entirely. School records from the time show many students arrived without food, but community programs, especially in church-run schools, often offered bread or soup. Was the lunchless child a widespread problem or a localised hardship? Records remain inconclusive. Back in the cities, lunch carts roam the streets. One sells slop coffee, black and cheap, served with condensed milk. Another offers chow chow, a pickled vegetable mix spooned over stale crackers. A factory girl buys 1 cup for herself and 1 for a friend who's stuck inside finishing her quota. She hands it through the cracked window with a wink. Small kindnesses, still hot. In immigrant communities, lunch carries flavour and identity. A Polish labourer eats cabbage rolls wrapped in oily newspaper. A Sicilian worker dips crusty bread into tomato broth, wiping his beard with his sleeve. A Jewish peddler unwraps a niche and shares it with the man next to him, both sitting on crates in an alley too narrow to turn around in. Lunch may be short, but it isn't silent. People laugh, gossip, tease. A man jokes that his sandwich could double as a hammer. A woman calls out to her friend, "Trade you my pickle for your cheese." The friend agrees, even though her cheese is actually a folded piece of cloth soaked in brine. It's a joke. Probably. Children who aren't in school roam the streets during lunch, looking for pennies to run errands or return bottles. Some are tasked with bringing meals to fathers at the dockyards. They dodge carts and horses, their baskets bouncing with bread and cans of beans. One boy drops a tin and cries, not because it broke, but because he knows his father will now go without. By 1 o'clock the break is over. Workers rise, shake out their legs, and return to machines, to shovels, to fields, to the weight of the world pressing down once more. The bell rings, the streets clear. The smell of food is replaced by smoke and sweat again. In some towns, afternoon lunch is the only meal people get until evening. They stretch it, save a crust, lick the grease off paper. Every bite matters. Nothing is wasted, even the crumbs. And in the quiet after the meal, something else begins to settle in. Fatigue. Not the fresh kind. The satisfying ache after a jog. This is bone-deep weariness. Eyes grow heavier, steps slower. But there's no pause button on the workday. No back in 5 signs. Only momentum. Only duty. Still, those stolen moments over lunch, however brief, however humble, become the glue that holds people together. They trade stories. They tease one another. They share burdens. In a world with few comforts, lunch becomes an act of endurance, of humour, of quiet defiance. It isn't fancy, it isn't generous, but it is theirs, and it gets them through. Afternoon settles into the bones like an ache. The sun is past its peak now, casting longer, more languid shadows over the brick factories, crowded tenements, dry fields and dusty main streets. The day is far from over, but this is the stretch where time begins to blur. Work continues, relentless, but now there's a weight to each motion, a dull repetition like trudging through molasses. Back in the cities, factory bells ring again, lunch is over, break time, if there was one, is done. People return to their stations, wiping grease from their fingers, buttoning their coats, tying their aprons. The air inside is thick with the scent of machinery oil, sweat and soot. The clatter of looms and presses resumes, only now it feels more personal. The second half of the workday always seems longer, harder. It's the part of the day where accidents happen, fingers slip, eyes droop. A distracted worker might drop a wrench or forget to disengage a gear. A woman working a sewing machine stitches right through her thumbnail but doesn't cry out. Just pulls the needle out, wraps her hand in a rag and keeps going. There's no time to stop. No one to cover for her. If she slows down, her pay gets docked. In the steel mills, the heat is stifling even in winter. Workers pour molten metal into moulds, sparks flying like fireflies on a rampage. The men wear singed leather aprons and sweat-stained caps. They shout to be heard over the roar. One man collapses from heat stroke and is dragged outside by two others. He'll be back tomorrow. They all will. A mainstream historical fact. In 1905, industrial accidents killed more than 25,000 workers annually in the United States. Safety protocols were nearly non-existent, and in many cases companies denied responsibility. If you lost a finger, you were expected to bring in your cousin to replace you by Monday. Children, still small enough to manoeuvre between gears and belts, continue their endless tasks, cleaning bobbins, replacing thread, fetching tools. Their eyes are red from the lint in the air. They don't speak unless spoken to. One girl, maybe 9, sings softly to herself as she folds cloth. A lullaby her mother used to sing, now barely audible over the machine's thunder. In coal towns, the underground tunnels grow darker and more dangerous by the hour. Candles flicker, air becomes stale. A miner wipes his brow, leaving a streak of soot across his face. He hears a rumble and holds his breath, but it passes. Just settling rock, this time. In the shaft next over, a boy drops his pick and curls his fingers. The calluses are cracking. His father tells him to wrap his hands in newspaper that night. It helps, somehow. Back on the farms, the afternoon brings relentless chores. There are rows to weed, water to haul, fences to mend. The animals need feeding again. The cow must be milked. Gently, patiently, even if your fingers are too cold to move. A teenage girl in Nebraska tugs a stubborn calf back into the barn while balancing a pail with the other hand. Her sleeves are rolled up. Her arms are strong. Her dreams of school are packed away like last year's seed. School, incidentally, is still in session, at least for those lucky enough to attend. In one-room schoolhouses across rural America, students sit on wooden benches, scratching sums into slates. The teacher, a young woman scarcely older than her oldest pupils, paces the narrow room, reciting grammar rules and geography lessons. Outside, the wind howls, but the potbelly stove is warm enough, for now. But not all children are at school. Many work through the afternoon, selling newspapers, shining shoes, helping mothers at laundries, hawking apples from a cart, or delivering telegrams across muddy streets. They're part of the workforce, not the classroom. One fringe tidbit. Some messenger boys in New York would race each other between deliveries for fun, and occasionally bet their entire lunch on the outcome. The fastest among them were considered legends, with nicknames like Lightning Tommy or Pigeon Jack. If they were lucky, they got to keep their tips. In small towns, the afternoons are quieter but no less industrious. Blacksmiths hammer out horseshoes in open-air forges. Shopkeepers take inventory by lamplight. Tailors finish hemming trousers by hand. One man in Kansas stitches with such precision that he becomes a local celebrity for making suits without measuring tape. Just touch and instinct. Women, as always, work whether paid or not. Domestic workers return from errands and begin preparing dinner. Housewives scrub laundry by hand, hanging sheets like battle flags across backyard lines. They mend socks, stir stews, sweep floors, and chase after toddlers. No one asks them what time it is. They know by the bread rising in the kitchen and the ache creeping into their ankles. In wealthier homes, Afternoon means tea. Not always proper English-style tea, but the ritual remains. A silver tray, tiny sandwiches, a sponge cake with jam. The lady of the house entertains a friend, sipping from a porcelain cup while discussing the latest scandal. Someone wore open-toed shoes to church last Sunday. Shocking! But even luxury has its weight. Servants flit in and out, invisible yet always present. One maid forgets to iron a napkin crease correctly. She gets docked for it. Another spills a drop of jam on a lace runner. She'll stay up until midnight washing it out. Wealth softens many things, but not expectations. In cities the streetcars clatter on, full of workers coming and going. A conductor rings the bell with bored precision. A newsboy jumps on between stops selling extras to tired passengers. "Fire on 2nd Street," he yells. Mayor's nephew arrested. It's all true, or at least true enough to earn a nickel. Around 4 o'clock, fatigue settles like fog. The world slows down not because it wants to, but because the human body can only take so much. A woman on her feet all day pauses to stretch her back. A man resting his shovel grips it tighter to stay awake. A child folding laundry stops for one guilty minute, staring out the window at a world still going. Historians still argue whether afternoon fatigue played a role in the rise of coffee breaks, which began informally during this era. Some suggest that factory managers noticed increased errors in the late afternoon and allowed short breaks, not for compassion, but for productivity. Others argue workers invented the concept themselves, sneaking sips in corners until it became tradition. In kitchens, preparations for the evening meal begin. Potatoes are peeled, beans are soaked, bread is set to rise again. Meat, if there is any, is trimmed of fat and stewed slowly. More often than not, it's a soup night, cheaper, easier, stretchable. A bone from last week boiled again with whatever vegetables haven't rotted. Salt added sparingly. Pepper, if you have it, like a celebration. Back in the factories, the end of the day looms. People glance at clocks, not out of excitement but calculation. How many pieces left to finish? How many seams to stitch? Will they make quota? Will they be short? If so, they might not be back tomorrow. The foreman is watching. He always is. Someone whispers a joke. It spreads down the line like a current. Brief smiles, even laughter. It's the first time today anyone's looked up. Then the whistle blows. Not the quitting whistle, just a warning. 15 minutes left. Just enough time to pray your hands hold steady. By 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on where and what you work, the day ends. Machines groan to a stop, lights flicker, doors are unlocked. Workers pour into the streets like molasses. Slow, heavy, reluctant to move but desperate to get away. One man lights a cigarette with trembling fingers. A woman hugs her shawl tighter. Children run to meet their fathers, mothers, sisters, uncles. The sidewalks fill. The air smells of coal dust and sweat and bread baking somewhere, faint but heavenly. Home is ahead. Maybe a bath. Maybe dinner. Maybe just a place to sit without moving. And yet, there's still more to do. The farmers come in from the fields with dirt in their eyebrows and splinters in their hands. The miners climb out of the earth blinking into the light. The shopkeepers sweep their stoops. The teachers erase chalkboards and tally grades by candlelight. The laundresses wring one last pair of stockings and hang them with fingers raw from lye. And those who've worked all day now face another kind of labour, making the night tolerable. Preparing food, mending clothes, reading by kerosene lamp, writing letters, teaching children, repairing tools, planning for tomorrow, because in 1905 the day doesn't end when the work ends. It just shifts shape. Back on the farms, the afternoon brings no relief, only new chores. If morning was about feeding and watering, now it's about fixing fences, hauling water, or wrestling stubborn machinery with bolts that refuse to turn. The sun sinks lower, but the work stretches out ahead, endless. Sweat beads on brows, dust clings to collars. A teenager pulls weeds with his bare hands, his fingernails packed with soil. His younger siblings chase after a loose chicken. The mother scolds, but gently. There's always another chicken, always another weed. In the cotton fields of the south, the sharecroppers are still bent at the waist, their backs curved like question marks. The sacks over their shoulders grow heavier with every row. A man wipes his brow with the back of his hand and watches a crow land on a fence post. Even the bird looks tired. A woman hums under her breath, a tune passed down from her grandmother's mouth to hers. She doesn't remember all the words, but the melody stays. Elsewhere, shopkeepers sweep the sidewalks in front of their stores, pushing dust into the gutters in slow arcs. A butcher hangs a new slab of beef in the window, swatting at flies that won't take the hint. A grocer measures sugar into paper sacks, trying not to spill even a grain. Prices are high, and profits are slim. A boy leans against the window, eyeing a jar of peppermint sticks. He counts the coins in his pocket. Not today. Maybe tomorrow. Upstairs, in sewing rooms and laundries, women lean over garments and washboards, their fingers swollen and red. Soap stings where their skin is cracked. The air smells of starch and damp cotton. One woman pauses to stretch her back and look out the window. She can see the smokestacks from here, tall and churning like chimneys for giants. She sighs and returns to her work. For domestic servants, the afternoon is a time of frantic tidying before the evening rush. The lady of the house may be resting, but the maids are not. Beds must be remade, linens aired, brass polished. A girl scrubs a marble floor until her wrists ache. Another folds napkins into precise triangles, practicing the same fold she's done since she was 12. In the kitchen, the cook preps for dinner, muttering under her breath as she bones fish and peels potatoes. A younger helper stirs a pot and sneaks a lick from the spoon. It's too salty. No one will care. One quirky, overlooked detail from the period. Many women in domestic roles carried a small bottle of vinegar in their aprons, not for cooking but for cleaning, disinfecting and even calming fainting spells. It was an all-purpose cure-all, and some claimed it even kept evil humours at bay. Whether that's medical science or superstition, historians still argue the point. The pace of work in the cities begins to shift around 4 o'clock. Some shops close, shutters drawn, receipts tallied by candlelight. Factory horns signal the final hour. Streets grow crowded again, not with leisure, but with transition. Horses pull wagons loaded with scrap metal or barrels of beer. Bakers in aprons toss breadcrumbs to pigeons outside their doors. A few boys linger near the trolley stops, hoping to shine shoes for one last dime. Over in the garment district, rows of girls stitch with practiced speed, watching the clock out of the corner of their eye. One girl tries to finish 3 blouses before the final bell. Another, younger, makes her hem crooked but hides it beneath a pleat. It's been a long day. Mistakes happen. If the inspector notices, she'll lose a nickel. If he doesn't, she might make enough to buy bread for her family tonight. Even in schoolrooms, the hours drag. Students sit at wooden desks, scratching slates with chalk, blinking in the dim light. Their stomachs growl. Their minds wander. A teacher drills Latin verbs with military precision, but half the class is already dreaming of the walk home. For those who aren't lucky enough to go to school, that same hour might mean another errand run, another coal bucket fetched, another floor scrubbed. For the men who work the streets, policemen, lamplighters, newsboys, the afternoon is a blur of motion. The lamplighter makes his rounds, lighting gas lamps with a long pole one by one. The glow is weak in the fading daylight, but will brighten with nightfall. A newsboy shouts headlines in a voice already going hoarse. Fire on 5th Avenue. Strike at the rail yard? Mayor under pressure. The headlines change, but his routine does not. Another paper, another nickel, another step closer to affording supper. Back on the railroads, workers hammer and haul through the final stretch of daylight. It's dangerous work, always has been, but in the waning light it's worse. One man loses his grip on a spike driver. It lands just inches from his boot. He laughs, nervous. Another day, another near miss. In the red light districts, women begin to stir. Hair is brushed, stockings pulled up, perfume dabbed behind ears. They are preparing for an entirely different kind of labour, one that carries its own risks and rituals. Some of them drink coffee to stay awake, others drink gin to forget. None of them know who will walk through the door tonight. In boarding houses and crowded apartments, the smell of cooking starts to bloom. Potatoes boiling, onions frying, the occasional sharp note of garlic. People begin to return home, one by one. A father wipes his hands on his pants and steps inside to find his youngest asleep by the stove. A mother checks the pot and adds water, making the soup stretch. A child sets the table, careful not to chip the only clean plate. The world outside begins to dim. Gas lamps flicker to life. The streets buzz with one last burst of energy before night truly falls. But inside the homes, people are already slowing down. Bodies slump into chairs, boots are unlaced, shirts are hung on hooks to be worn again tomorrow. There's a pause in the motion, a collective exhale. One teenager, home from a 14-hour shift in a textile mill, slumps onto a cot and eats his dinner without tasting it. His mother strokes his hair, humming softly. He doesn't speak. He just chews and listens. The sound of the city fades behind him. He closes his eyes. Elsewhere, a woman opens a letter by lamplight. It's from her brother in Kansas. He says the harvest is coming late this year. He says the prices are still low. He says he might come visit, if the train fare isn't too steep. She smiles and folds the letter carefully. She'll read it again tomorrow, maybe aloud this time. Open scholarly debate. Some researchers believe the extended workdays contributed directly to the rise of communal gathering spaces like taverns, church basements, and eventually union halls, places where workers could reclaim a fragment of their day. Others argue these places were simply extensions of labour itself. More obligations, more expectations, more talk of tomorrow's toil. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. And as the final hour of daylight fades, the country glows in 100 different ways. Oil lamps, candles, gaslight, stove fires, all flickering, all tired, all alive. There's a strange kind of beauty in the hush of this hour. A pause before the final chapter of the day. Before dinner, before sleep, before it all begins again. And in that pause, there is memory. A boy laying bricks remembers his father's hands doing the same. A woman folding laundry thinks of her mother's voice singing over the same task. A child watching steam rise from a pot wonders what he'll be when he's grown. These are the quiet moments that tether a life together. Not the wages earned or the chores done, but the rhythm beneath them. So, as the late afternoon leans toward evening, America's workers push through the final stretch. Their backs ache. Their shoes are worn thin, their eyes sting. But they're not done yet. Not quite. The sun drops lower, the bells ring, the doors swing open, and home, whatever that means, wherever it is, starts calling them back. Evening descends slowly across early 20th century America, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with a quiet, collective exhale. The long shadows of the workday stretch thin, curling through alleyways, across wide fields, down cobbled streets, and into the cracks of worn wooden homes. The nation begins to fold itself inward, drawing a tattered quilt of habit and fatigue over its tired shoulders. In cities, the gas lamps hiss to life, lighting street corners with their faint yellow glow. Shopkeepers pull shutters over windows. The last trolley rumbles past, clanging like a tired bell. Newspaper boys vanish, their voices swallowed by the noise of clinking bottles and closing gates. Workers stream from the factories in a flood of aching limbs and soot-stained collars, each carrying the weight of another day's labour on their backs like invisible baggage. Back at home, or what passes for home in a tenement or boarding house, the real business of the evening begins. Families gather if they can. Sometimes it's a single room shared by 6. Sometimes it's a cot behind a curtain. Wherever it is, it smells of boiled potatoes, lard, and maybe cabbage if someone struck culinary gold. Dinner in most homes is not a feast, it's fuel. The meal depends on luck, leftovers, and labour. Bread is always there, but fresh bread is a luxury. Often it's day-old, reheated, softened with a damp rag in the oven. Beans are common, cheap, filling, and easy to stretch. Stews made from bones, carrots, onions, and faith bubble in chipped pots. Rice, when available, is seasoned with broth from last week's meat. Sometimes someone brings home a treat, a bit of butter, a slice of salted pork, a half pint of beer to share between 4. In one Brooklyn tenement, a woman feeds her children slices of cornmeal mush fried crisp at the edges. They eat in silence, save for the occasional grunt or slurp. One boy licks his plate. She doesn't scold him. She does the same when no one's looking. Across the country, in a farmstead in Iowa, a family sits at a pine table by lantern light. There's milk from the cow they raised, cornbread from the mill down the road, and pickled beets in cloudy jars that survived another winter. The father blesses the meal, the children dig in. No one wastes a bite, not with winter just a few months away again. It's always just a few months away. One mainstream fact: in 1906, the average American household spent more than 40% of its income on food. For lower-income families, that percentage often climbed to 60 or more. Most meals were homemade out of necessity, not nostalgia. Conversations around the dinner table vary widely. In immigrant homes, Yiddish, Polish, Italian, and dozens of other languages blend with English in strange, beautiful ways. A mother asks her daughter how many shirts she finished at the factory. A father grumbles about rent. A teenager brags about how he outran the trolley conductor to avoid paying. A toddler knocks over a cup. It's the loudest moment of the day. In southern black households, dinner is often seasoned with laughter, gospel humming, and the unspoken weight of survival. Fried okra, rice with gravy, biscuits hardened at the edges but soft in the middle. It all gets passed around. Grandma tells a story, Mama rolls her eyes. The cousins argue over who gets the last spoonful of beans. For a moment, the world feels less cruel. But not every dinner is filled with warmth. In many homes, silence reigns. The parents are too tired, the children too hungry, the food too thin. In some places, soup is served with more water than anything else, just to stretch it. One child lies and says she already ate at school. Her mother doesn't believe her, but says nothing. She slides her own portion across the table. Among boarders and single men, the evening meal is often taken in public, at taverns, diners, or boarding house kitchens. A man might eat fried eggs and toast in silence, the clink of his fork echoing off the walls. Another, a recent immigrant, tries beef stew for the first time and winces. Too salty, but warm, and warm counts for more than taste these days. Some women take in boarders just to cover the cost of meals. They cook vats of stew, boil cheap cuts of meat into chewable submission, and serve it all with stiff coffee. One woman in Chicago is known for her Thursday surprise, a dish so mysterious that not even her children know what's in it. It tastes different every week, and yet somehow always the same. Children who aren't at home often fend for themselves. They beg at bakery doors hoping for stale rolls. They sneak into alleys behind restaurants looking for scraps. A few hustle for coins by performing tricks on the street. Somersaults, handstands, or just the old reliable sad eyes routine. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a fringe tidbit worth noting here. During the early 1900s, in cities like New York and Boston, there were unofficial bread lines even before the Great Depression. Charities and church groups would hand out crusts, rolls, and sometimes soup to those who lined up quietly. It wasn't a system, it was barely an act of charity. But it was something. After dinner, the evening stretches ahead in a mix of exhaustion and ritual. There's still cleaning to be done, dishes to scrape, floors to sweep, babies to bathe in basins, clothes are laid out for the next day, tools are repaired, lists are made, rent is counted again, as if the numbers might change this time. In some homes, the Bible is read aloud. In others, newspapers are passed hand to hand, stories half whispered, headlines mispronounced but still understood. A father reads about a fire in another city and mutters, "Could be us next." A mother reads about a woman winning the right to speak at City Hall and nods just once. Leisure exists, in its own quiet, exhausted form. Children play with buttons, scraps of string, or rag dolls made from old aprons. A boy carves shapes into the windowsill with a pocket knife. He'll get scolded tomorrow, but tonight he's an artist. A girl teaches her younger brother to whistle. It sounds like a kettle giving up. Adults talk if they have the energy. They argue sometimes. About politics, about work, about whose turn it is to patch the roof. A neighbour stops by with a basket of bread or bad news. They stay too long. No one minds. In some neighbourhoods, people gather outside on stoops or porches. A woman knits by gaslight. A man smokes and tells a story about his uncle's mule. Teenagers flirt awkwardly under the pretense of borrowing sugar. Children chase fireflies. One jumps too far and skins a knee. He cries. His sister tells him he's a baby, then gives him half her biscuit. In tenement buildings, you can hear music through the walls. A harmonica in one room, a violin in another. Someone sings, badly, but with heart. Someone else bangs a broomstick on the floor to make them stop. Nobody does. Not yet. Open scholarly debate. Historians disagree on how common communal leisure was in working-class neighbourhoods. Some argue that shared spaces like stoops and washhouses created bonds and collective resilience. Others claim that overcrowding, noise and tension made solitude more desirable. The truth, as always, likely varied block by block, brick by brick. And slowly the lights begin to dim. In houses with electricity, which in 1905 still means only about 8% of homes, It's a flick of a switch. In most others, it's candles, kerosene lamps, or nothing at all. A single flame casts long shadows. A child traces them on the wall with a finger, imagining monsters, angels, or the train he saw once at the station. People begin to prepare for bed, not with silk pyjamas or warm milk, but with routines honed by necessity. A bucket is filled for washing faces, hair is braided, teeth are brushed with baking soda or not at all. One woman rubs goose grease on her knees for joint pain. A man tucks newspaper into his shoes to hold their shape. Someone winds the alarm clock even though the rooster is louder. Beds are claimed, siblings shoved in together, parents on sagging mattresses, grandparents on rocking chairs if nothing else is available. In some homes, children sleep 3 to a bed, arranged like logs to save space and warmth. In others, the youngest curls up in a drawer pulled halfway open. The night air seeps in. A train whistle echoes in the distance. A dog barks. Somewhere, someone coughs. A deep, rattling sound that doesn't stop for a while. Tuberculosis, maybe, or just a cold. No one checks. And then, silence, or close to it. The world never goes completely quiet in early 1900s America. There's always a creak, a snore, a whispered prayer, a leaking faucet. But it gets close enough for dreams to sneak in, close enough to rest. The night has finally settled, not just in time or temperature, but in mood, in breath, in the quiet sigh of bodies that have endured. In the early 1900s, sleep doesn't arrive wrapped in memory foam or noise-cancelling luxury. It arrives on straw mattresses, squeaky springs, horsehair pillows, or, when nothing else is available, a folded coat on a wooden floor. Across the country, homes dim to darkness. Lamps are snuffed out, candles blown away with wishes unspoken. The scent of tallow and kerosene lingers in the air like a final whisper. Windows creak open for a breath of cooler air, even if it lets the mosquitoes in. The sounds of the day, the clatter of wheels, the hammering of tools, the shouting of street vendors, fade, replaced by a chorus of creaks, snores, and distant footsteps. Inside cramped city tenements, families crowd into tiny rooms. One bed might hold a mother, a father, 2 children, and an infant. Older kids sleep on the floor, curled around each other for warmth. Privacy is a luxury for the rich. For the poor, sleep is communal, layered, and occasionally interrupted by a kicking foot or a sudden snore. A rat scurries across the floor. No one screams. They're used to it. Out on the farms, the silence is different. It is wide, endless, and stitched with the sounds of owls, wind over fields, and the occasional rustle of something too small to name. A boy curls up in a loft above the barn, too tired to make it to the house after evening chores. He wraps himself in a wool blanket and watches the stars through a crack in the roof. He counts 3 shooting stars before drifting off. Mainstream fact: at the turn of the century, most rural Americans rose and slept with the sun. Early to bed, early to rise wasn't just moral advice. It was the only way to manage labour without electricity or alarm clocks. By 1910, only around 10% of American homes had electricity, and most of those were in urban areas. Boarding houses across industrial cities now quiet to a murmur. Men in their undershirts sit on the edges of shared beds, pulling off socks stiff with the sweat of steel mills and slaughterhouses. They cough. They stretch. Some sip a final spoonful of whiskey from a flask wrapped in a rag. One whispers a prayer. Another tucks a letter from home under his pillow, creased and stained, but still the most valuable thing he owns. One floor above, a room full of seamstresses has gone silent. A candle sputters out. A girl whispers in Yiddish, asking if someone is still awake. No one answers. Everyone is asleep, or pretending to be. There's a fringe tradition in parts of Appalachia. The first sleep and second sleep pattern. Families would often go to bed after sunset, wake briefly around midnight to tend to the fire or talk, then return to bed until morning. Whether this was due to lack of entertainment or the natural rhythm of candlelit life, historians still debate. But journals from the period confirm that segmented sleep was not unusual. In the south, on plantations turned sharecropping farms, workers sleep in cramped cabins. The air is thick, mosquitoes hum. One man fans himself with a Bible, swatting at the same gnat for the 3rd time. He tells himself stories from the Book of Exodus. Freedom feels close in the words, even if not in reality. A child sleeps with her arm around her doll, handmade from a corn husk and scraps of cloth. Her mother watches for a moment before turning away. The door is left ajar. The breeze helps. A little. In nicer homes, bedtime is more structured. The children are read to Little Lord Fauntleroy, or The Secret Garden, or Bible stories if father's in the mood. Baths have been taken in tin tubs earlier in the evening, hair brushed, nightgowns buttoned. The sheets smell faintly of lavender soap and ironing starch. In these homes, bedtime prayers are spoken aloud, with folded hands and serious tones. A maid checks the fireplace to make sure the embers won't smoke. She straightens the rugs before finally retreating to the servant quarters, usually a cot in the attic or a mattress near the kitchen. Her day started at 5 a.m. It will start again at 5 a.m. In mining towns, men sleep lightly. Any rumble, any crack in the earth might mean trouble underground. Even above ground, the creaks and groans of a wooden cabin resting on unstable ground keep people up. One miner drinks a glass of warm milk, another lies with his boots still on, too tired to untie the knots. In jails and institutions, the night holds a different shape. Metal beds, thin blankets, the shuffle of guards, the moans of men who cannot sleep or will not. One man writes in a notebook beneath the covers, hiding the pencil each time the light passes his door. He is writing a poem. It is terrible, but it is his. Open scholarly debate. Sleep patterns of early 20th century Americans remain a topic of research, with diaries and family records suggesting a wide range of practices. Did people sleep more deeply because they were more physically exhausted, or did the discomforts of their environment make for restless nights? There's evidence for both, and no clear consensus. Somewhere in Kansas, a teacher lies awake counting her pennies in the dark. She wonders if she'll have enough to buy new chalk and a ribbon for her hat. Her window is cracked open, and the breeze rattles the blind. She smiles just slightly. Tomorrow is spelling bee day. The kids will be excited. And in cities, night does not silence everything. Streetcars rattle down avenues. Cats fight under porches. Someone plays a trumpet, poorly, from a fire escape. The song echoes across the rooftops, trailing into a lullaby no one asked for but everyone hears. A factory foreman sits in his parlour reading the newspaper by lamp glow. The lead story is about labour unrest in the north. He frowns, lights his pipe and turns the page. He doesn't want to think about what tomorrow might bring. A single mother rocks her infant to sleep, a chair creaking in rhythm with her heartbeat. She hums, her voice barely above a whisper, a melody she made up yesterday and has already forgotten the words to. The baby sighs. For those who work the graveyard shift, night watchmen, bakers, hospital nurses, telegraph operators, sleep comes at dawn. Until then, they wander quiet corridors and dimly lit streets, speaking to no one. A baker kneads dough while the world sleeps. A nurse checks pulses by oil lamp. A telegraph key clicks, reporting a storm in the west. Back in the tenements, a child wakes from a nightmare. He climbs into bed with his older sister, and she pulls the blanket over both of them without opening her eyes. In homes without clocks, people judge the night by instinct. When the fire burns low, when the rooster stirs in its coop, when the church bell chimes once, twice, 3 times, and somewhere, maybe in a tiny cabin in Maine, or a bunkhouse in Utah, or a boarding room in Chicago, a man whispers, "Good night," to no one in particular. Just the world, just the dark. It's a strange comfort, the way the world lies down together, rich and poor, north and south, worker and boss, side by side, separate and yet joined in that daily ritual of rest. Sleep comes not easily, but deeply, eventually, on broken beds, on dusty rugs, in hammocks, under quilts, beside fires, and even on floors. People dream of freedom, of bread, of dances, of escape, and some simply don't dream at all, just drift. The sky above them is wide and moonlit, indifferent and soft. The stars blink. The wind hushes the trees. America at last rests. Tomorrow it all begins again. Before the sun rises, America stirs again. The first to wake are not the roosters, but the bakers, the milkmen, the railway porters, the mothers with infants to feed. In boarding houses and brownstones, on homesteads and hilltops, the early 1900s yawns its way into another day. Sleep leaves quietly. Labour does not wait. A baker in Cincinnati rises in the black stillness of 3:30 a.m. He lights the fire in his oven, flour dusting his apron before he's fully conscious. The sourdough was left to rise overnight in wooden troughs. Now it must be shaped, scored, and shoved into the heat. The bakery's windows will fog up by sunrise, and people will line up not just for bread, but for warmth, for the smell of something good before facing another round of toil. In another neighbourhood, a milkman harnesses his horse and loads his cart with clinking bottles, heavy with cream and rattling ice. He'll travel dozens of blocks before breakfast. By the time most city folks rise, he'll already be home, eating cold ham and sipping lukewarm tea, his route complete. Back on farms, the sky glows a shy blue. A rooster crows eventually, but he's already late to the party. The farmer is outside before the frost has melted, prying open the chicken coop, tossing feed, checking the well pump with stiff fingers. His wife is in the kitchen, apron tied over her nightgown, stirring cornmeal into a pan while listening to the soft cooing of the baby in the next room. Breakfast on the farm is a moment of pride, hearty, simple, and entirely built from scratch. Eggs are gathered fresh. Butter is churned or taken from a cool cellar. Leftover bacon grease is used to fry yesterday's potatoes. A biscuit might be split and slathered with apple preserves if last summer's canning went well. Mainstream fact: in the early 1900s, breakfast was the most calorically dense meal for most working Americans. Labourers required energy early, often consuming meats, breads, and hot cereals long before the sun reached its peak. Coffee became a near necessity, even for teenagers, especially in rural areas. In tenement apartments and working-class city flats, breakfast is far more modest. Black coffee, often watered down, stale bread dunked into milk, oatmeal, if someone remembered to soak it overnight, a boiled egg split between two siblings. The kitchen smells faintly of iron pans and yesterday's onions. Children groggily pull on socks, their shoes waiting by the door, scuffed and handed down twice. One combs his hair with spit, another tries to sew a missing button before her school bell rings. School lunch doesn't exist for most of them. Breakfast might be the only real meal until supper. In wealthier homes, breakfast unfolds as a quieter ritual. A maid lays the tablecloth just right, placing silver spoons beside porcelain cups. There may be toast with marmalade, soft-boiled eggs, or broiled tomatoes with tea. The man of the house reads the newspaper while his wife pours the coffee. No one speaks loudly. The clink of china is the only real sound. Even here, though, the day waits with bated breath. A coachman tightens the harness on the horse. A governess reminds the children to recite their Latin before lessons, and the cook is already thinking about luncheon. Elsewhere, night workers stagger home. A nurse in a starched apron pulls her shawl tighter against the morning chill. She's just finished 12 hours on her feet. One of the patients didn't make it through the night. She'll go home, soak her feet in cold water, and sleep with one eye open, just in case someone in the building knocks with an emergency. A telegraph operator stretches, rubbing his eyes. He's been tapping out code all night, mostly weather reports and train delays. One message hinted at a strike forming in a Chicago stockyard. He files it under miscellaneous. He doesn't ask questions, he just sends the dots and dashes. Back on the street, the world begins to thrum. Streetcars rattle past again, now fuller, now louder. Newspaper boys bark headlines with voices that crack mid-shout. Coal mine explosion in West Virginia. Senator's scandal in D.C. New invention promises electric home. Only one of these is remotely true. Doesn't matter. The papers sell anyway. A fringe tidbit? Some newspaper boys were known to pre-read all the papers early and invent more dramatic headlines if sales were slow, earning nicknames like headline hucksters. One even claimed President Roosevelt had wrestled a bear in Montana. Sales tripled. Factory doors groan open again. The air is thick with smoke and steam before 7 a.m. Workers trickle in, stamping their feet, adjusting their caps. Someone lights a cigarette. Another woman tightens the strap on her overalls and heads toward the sewing machines. There's no easing in. The machines start screaming right away. You catch up, or you get left behind. In textile mills, the cotton dust begins to swirl, catching the weak morning light in threads of gold. The looms clack. A foreman shouts. A teenage girl winces as a splinter lodges in her palm but doesn't stop weaving. She doesn't want to lose her spot. There's a line of girls waiting for a job just outside. In coal towns, men descend into the dark long before the sun climbs. They take the cage elevator down, no safety nets, just creaking metal and the trust of repetition. The tunnels are damp, the air already stale, but this is the job. Dig or starve. One miner pats the beam of the tunnel before lifting his pick. It's his way of praying. Another scratches tally marks into the wall. He doesn't know why. No one ever counts them, but it helps. Children head to school, those who can. Some carry worn books tied with twine. Others carry nothing at all. One boy has a slate, a stub of chalk and 3 pennies in his pocket. He hopes no one notices he's wearing his cousin's shoes. 2 sizes too large, stuffed with newspaper. At recess, he'll run anyway. That's what recess is for. In towns with no school, children are sent straight to work. A girl of 11 fetches water for the boarding house before scrubbing the kitchen floor. Her brother 9 is already sweeping the general store's porch. Education is a dream spoken about in whispers. They'll learn numbers eventually when it's time to calculate rent. Across the country, horses pull carts of coal, vegetables, furniture and people. Streets clatter with hooves, not engines. Even in cities, the car is still a rarity. The automobile might be the future, but the present smells like manure and hay. One mainstream fact. In 1908, the Ford Model T entered production and changed the trajectory of personal transport. But for years after its debut, most Americans still travelled by foot, trolley, or horse-drawn carriage. The roads weren't ready, and neither were the wallets. Meanwhile, in parlours and offices, typewriters begin clacking. Secretaries open windows, clerks arrange ledgers on desks. A young woman with crisp handwriting pens invoices for a dry goods company. Her fingers are stained with ink. She glances at the wall clock. 8:01. She's late. A door slams open. The boss is early. Her heart drops. But he doesn't say anything. Just tosses his coat on the hook and lights a cigar. She exhales slowly and gets back to work. Open scholarly debate. Some historians suggest the expansion of clerical work in the early 1900s created new space for women in the workforce, but others argue it merely shifted expectations, locking them into pink-collar roles with low pay and little mobility. Either way, the typewriter became both a tool and a symbol. As the morning unfolds, energy builds. The day is young, but its shape is already forming. A seamstress hums a hymn as her needle flashes. A barber sharpens his straight razor on a worn leather strop, greeting the first customer with a "Morning, sir," he doesn't mean. A teacher writes today's spelling words on the board in perfect script. Industry, determination, hardship. She doesn't see the irony, or maybe she does. A postman winds down an alley with a heavy satchel. He delivers a letter with trembling fingers. Inside, a mother opens it. Her hands shake. Her son in Pittsburgh has found work. She cries anyway. Not from sadness, from a quiet relief too big for words. In a park, 3 children play with a hoop and stick, laughter bouncing off the stone walls. A policeman tells them to move along. They scatter like sparrows, and by now the sun is high enough to warm the walls. Laundry is hung, floors are swept again. The day, fully awake, has taken its place. Another Tuesday, or Wednesday. It doesn't really matter. Every day in early 1900s, America begins this way, with hunger, sweat, ritual and motion. And though the technology will change, and the headlines will shift, the rhythm is eternal. So as the country hums forward on the rattle of wheels and the clatter of type bars, remember this. It all starts with early footsteps, quiet routines, and the first breath of coffee steam rising into a sky not yet full. Mid-morning settles in like a steady drum beat. The rush of dawn has passed, but the momentum of the day is now in full swing. In early 1900s America, the hours between 9 and noon are where the grind deepens. Routines harden into repetition, and the world clicks forward with the practiced rhythm of a society that doesn't yet know rest by any modern definition. In the factory districts, the air is now thick with heat and motion. Steam hisses from pipes. Machines roar like mechanical beasts shaking the floor beneath workers' feet. In textile mills, workers are hunched over spinning frames, fingers flying, ears numb to the constant clatter. A girl sneezes from the cotton dust, wipes her nose on her sleeve and keeps sewing. If she falls behind quota, the floor manager will notice, and there's always someone hungrier waiting outside for her job. Across the street a foundry rattles with the sound of hammers. Sparks burst like fireflies from the mouths of furnaces. Men with soot-streaked faces lift iron beams as though their spines are made of rope. One curses under his breath when a rivet flies too close to his eye. He's lucky. Last week a man lost 3 fingers. That story gets passed around like a cautionary tale and a badge of honour. In office buildings uptown, clerks lean over ledgers and clack away on Remington typewriters. A soft rain of carbon paper flakes floats through the air. In one room, a young woman files invoices with ruthless efficiency, her lips moving silently as she counts. Her boss watches her through a glass window, thinking not of her speed but whether she's pretty enough to staff the front desk. He decides she's not. She's relieved. This was the era where gendered labour roles were hardening like plaster. Women were typists, telephone operators, seamstresses, nurses. Men were bosses, bankers, builders, butchers. One mainstream fact: in 1910, fewer than 25% of women were in the workforce, but among them, over half were clustered in just a handful of occupations considered appropriate. Teaching, sewing, or service, anything more was suspect. In a telegraph office in Missouri, the morning hums in dots and dashes. Operators lean over wooden desks, fingers tapping out messages at lightning speed. A man sends word of a flood 2 towns over. A boy in the corner reads incoming messages to learn Morse code. His boss lets him, as long as he stays quiet. His father was a telegraph man. He wants to be one too. He thinks it sounds like magic. Back on the farm, the animals are fed and watered, and now it's time for the hard work. Ploughing, planting, fence mending, orchard pruning, wood cutting. One boy guides a mule through a muddy field, his boots sucking at the ground like they want to keep him there forever. He hums to the animal, just to break the silence. A hawk circles overhead. The boy thinks of how nice it would be to fly, even just once. His sister is inside churning butter. Her arms ache already, and it's not yet noon. She daydreams about living in a city, being a nurse, wearing gloves that aren't patched at the fingertips. But when she hears the screen door creak open, she straightens up. Dreams can wait. Domestic workers in city homes bustle through the late morning, scrubbing floors, changing linens, ironing trousers. The mistress of the house is preparing to receive visitors, and everything must be spotless. A maid polishes a silver teapot with such focus that she forgets to blink. Downstairs, the cook is elbow deep in biscuit dough. Lunch won't make itself. Some houses had speaking tubes, hollow pipes connecting rooms so the lady of the house could call for service without shouting. A fringe tidbit? Servants sometimes blew into the tubes when no one was listening, just to startle the upstairs occupants. Whether out of boredom or rebellion is still debated by those few who recorded it. In the streets, the peddlers are back in motion. One man sells shoelaces, another offers newspapers, peanuts and chewing gum from the same tattered crate. A blind veteran stands on the corner with a harmonica and a sign. Help a man who gave his sight. A few people toss him coins, a few just walk past. Streetcars clatter down their routes, packed with clerks, errand boys, housemaids, and sometimes, just sometimes, a woman in a large hat and gloves, heading to a matinee or charity luncheon. She keeps her gloves on. She doesn't want to touch anything. Open scholarly debate. Some historians argue the strict class and gender divisions visible in these hours, who laboured, who dined, who rode versus who walked, cemented the social stratifications that would define the century. Others claim these boundaries were already eroding under the weight of industrial change. Diaries, wage logs and photographs offer conflicting truths. At school, students are deep into their lessons. The teacher drills spelling words, manufacture, citizen, responsibility, in a sing-song voice. Boys fidget, girls whisper. The room smells of chalk and sweat and tightly bound books. A boy stares out the window, imagining a train rolling past. Another chews the end of his pencil like it might give up the answer. In black schools, when they exist at all, the buildings are often old and underheated, the supplies donated or non-existent. Still, the teachers persevere. One woman in Mississippi teaches history with hand-drawn maps and stories passed down by mouth. She knows her students may not finish the school year, many leave to work the fields, but she teaches anyway. For her, education is resistance. By now the sun is near its highest point and the workers begin to feel it. Factory floors grow hotter, workshops turn into ovens. In Pittsburgh, a blacksmith wipes his brow with an oily rag, takes a swig of water from a dented flask and gets back to work. In a Chicago stockyard, a butcher sharpens his cleaver, slicing meat with robotic precision. He's already on his third carcass of the day. The lunch hour approaches and people begin to stir with hunger. But lunch break in 1905 isn't a long, luxurious affair. For most, it's 15 to 30 minutes of whatever they packed, if they packed anything. In textile mills, girls gather in corners to unwrap cheese sandwiches, cold beans in jars or leftover potatoes. One girl swaps half a pickle for a slice of bread. They eat quickly, sometimes sitting on overturned crates or concrete steps, their backs curved like commas. In offices, clerks dart out for beef stew or oyster crackers at nearby lunch counters. A few bring tins from home, boiled eggs, bread, maybe a slice of dried apple pie. Coffee is consumed like a sacred ritual, hot, bitter, necessary. In wealthier homes, lunch is a formal affair. A roast chicken, a cucumber salad, chilled lemonade served in tall glasses. Servants stand by in silence. The family talks politics or literature. If guests are present, conversation steers clear of anything vulgar, which includes, ironically, labour conditions, the price of coal, or news from the factories just 5 blocks away. In mining towns, workers eat in dark break rooms carved into the earth. Their food is covered in coal dust. They laugh about it, but it's not really funny. One man keeps a tin of peppermints in his shirt pocket. He offers one to a new guy. Cuts the soot. It doesn't. But the gesture matters. Children at school unwrap wax paper parcels packed by their mothers. Slices of bread with lard, maybe an apple, maybe not. Some kids have nothing. They pretend to eat. One girl nibbles the corner of a folded napkin. A boy next to her slides half his sandwich across the desk without saying a word. By 11:45, some stores close briefly for lunch. Others stay open. Profit never sleeps. A clerk leans on a display of shaving cream tins, chewing a biscuit and watching the street. A customer wanders in, asks for something they don't sell and leaves with nothing but complaints. As noon rings from a nearby bell tower, a dozen things happen at once. A woman faints in the heat of the garment floor. A teacher slaps a ruler against a desk to silence a squabble. A baby screams in a boarding house, startling a neighbour into spilling soup. And in all that clamour, something else thrums beneath the surface. Ambition. One girl pockets a nickel from her lunch and dreams of opening her own shop. A boy ties his shoes with a new knot he invented, convinced it'll make him rich someday. A young man walking briskly down the street mutters business ideas under his breath, unaware he's being watched by a curious dog from a stoop. The mid-morning may be just another stretch of work, just more grinding, stamping, lifting, filing, bleeding. But in every corner, behind every set jaw and blinking eye, the future is thinking. And though they don't know it yet, the 1900s will make them the first Americans to step into the age of mass production, organised labour, and consumer culture. For now, though, they just eat their beans, count their nickels, watch the clock. The next bell is coming soon. The clang of the noon bell echoes like a starting gun, not for rest, but for the second half of the race. In early 1900s America, there is no such thing as a true lunch break for most people. The day is divided not by leisure but by rhythm. Dawn brings duties, mid-morning brings sweat, and the stretch from noon to late afternoon demands endurance. In the factory, lunch ends abruptly. A foreman shouts over the din. Machines, briefly silenced, roar back to life. Women wipe crumbs from their skirts. Men tighten their belts. The heat has deepened. The air is heavier. Even the noise feels closer now, as if it's pressing against the skin. A girl adjusts the bandana over her mouth to keep the cotton dust out. It doesn't help much, but it's something. In steel mills, the real work is just beginning. The morning was prep. Now, the pouring begins. Molten metal glows like lava as it's ladled into moulds. One misstep means injury, or worse. A man named Pete watches the stream flow like a river from hell, his gloves smoking as he adjusts the chute. This is his 10th year on the job. His eyebrows never grew back after year 2. He doesn't miss them. Mainstream fact. Steel production was one of the most dangerous occupations in the early 20th century. In 1907 alone, over 15,000 workers were killed in industrial accidents across the US. many in foundries and mines. Safety regulations were nearly non-existent, and compensation for injuries was rare if offered at all. In city shops and department stores, the tempo picks up. Clerks scurry to restock shelves. Shoppers, many just browsing, drift through the aisles, fingering lace gloves or admiring new hats behind glass. A boy in a wool uniform sweeps sawdust across the tiled floor to mask the squeak of leather shoes. Out on the street, delivery wagons weave between pedestrians. Horses huff in the heat. Children duck past vendors selling peanuts, pickles, or roasted chestnuts. A man hawks patent medicines from a cart. Dr. Blackwell's miracle elixir, guaranteed to cure gout, grief, and grey hair. He winks, someone laughs, someone buys it. Not far away, a mother scrubs laundry in the backyard while her toddler toddles dangerously close to the washtub. She pulls him back by the arm without breaking her rhythm. She has 4 more shirts to wash before starting dinner. The baby wails. She sings softly to him, some made-up lullaby from nowhere. In schools, students return from recess with dirt on their knees and chalk dust in their hair. The air smells of sweat and ink and possibility. A teacher lectures on geography. The Mississippi River is over 2,300 miles long. A boy in the back imagines building a raft and floating all the way to the ocean. His sister elbows him. He startles. The teacher sighs. In the post office, sacks of mail arrive from morning trains. Clerks sort letters with mechanical efficiency. Love notes, bills, advertisements, government notices. One woman notices a letter addressed in a trembling hand, postage crooked. She pauses, curious, then slides it into the outgoing pile. Curiosity is dangerous in a place built on repetition. In a small-town doctor's office, the waiting room fills with coughing children and nervous mothers. A boy winces as his splintered arm is examined. The doctor doesn't have much beyond iodine, gauze and grit. He sets the bone with a stick and tape, pats the boy's shoulder and moves on. No charge, just pay when you can. That might be never. A fringe tidbit. Many rural physicians in the 1900s were paid not in cash, but in goods. One journal entry from a doctor in Kansas reads, Tuesday, extracted molar. Received 2 jars of preserves and a chicken. Fair trade. In the kitchens of restaurants and hotels, cooks are sweating. Literally. The heat from wood stoves turns narrow kitchens into infernos. A blackened skillet hisses with onions. A line cook yells for more butter. A waitress hurries past, balancing a tray of chipped china and muttering a prayer that the roast is ready. Meanwhile, in the parlours of the well-to-do, the afternoon glides more gently. A woman lounges with a novel, fanning herself lazily. Her daughter practices piano in the next room, badly. The dog barks. The maid dusts a china figurine for the 3rd time that week. Outside, a gardener prunes hedges with the kind of patience usually reserved for saints and chess players. But even in these homes, rest is a performance. Guests arrive for tea, china clinks, lemon slices float in delicate cups. One woman comments on a suffragette rally she passed on the way over. Another tuts disapprovingly. The room stiffens. The conversation shifts to dresses instead. Open scholarly debate. Some historians believe upper-class women in the early 1900s held more cultural power than previously acknowledged, subtly shaping social norms and family politics from within the home. Others argue their influence was sharply limited by the domestic sphere and male gatekeeping. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, and varies by region. Back in the factories, the rhythm continues. The second wind of the day begins to falter. The air grows stale. Foreheads shine with sweat. Eyes blur. A woman pricks her finger and doesn't even flinch. There's no time to stop. She wipes the blood on her apron and keeps sewing. In the yards of railroad depots, men wrestle with freight. Crates of flour, barrels of sugar, bundles of wool. A man with a clipboard shouts orders. Another waves to his cousin on a passing boxcar. Neither smiles. They're too tired. But it matters that they saw each other. In the tenements, toddlers nap in corners while their mothers iron. The hiss of starch and steam mingles with street noise. A girl peeks out the window at the bakery down the block, wondering if she might have a penny for a biscuit later. She won't. But it doesn't stop her from imagining the flaky crust melting on her tongue. And above all of this, the noise, the labour, the quiet rebellion of the body against its own weariness sits a clock. Always ticking, always watching. Every worker knows the shape of the hour hand like it's part of their own skin. By 3 o'clock the city is a hive. Trolleys whir past like clockwork. Delivery boys run errands with coin purses tied tight. A young woman counts receipts behind a dry goods counter, wondering if she'll have enough to buy a ribbon for her hair. She smiles at customers anyway. On farms, the heat begins to shift. Shadows lengthen. A man wipes his brow with a red handkerchief, squints at the fence he rebuilt and considers it acceptable. He still has to check the root cellar. The potatoes are sprouting too early. Again. In coal mines, shifts are swapped. One crew comes up, blackened and coughing. Another descends, quieter than the first. Underground, the only light is from lamps strapped to foreheads. The walls press close. Somewhere in the dark, someone whistles. It's the same tune every day. No one knows the words. By late afternoon, exhaustion is a shared language, the kind that exists without words, spoken in slumped shoulders and slower steps. A teacher finishes grading spelling quizzes, her red pencil tapping against the desk like a metronome. One boy spelled responsibility as responsibility. She smiles and writes good try beside it. In a telephone exchange, rows of young women plug wires into boards like organists playing a symphony of voices. A caller demands to be connected to the mayor. Another asks for his wife and forgets her name in the moment. The operator, without missing a beat, connects him anyway. A girl delivers telegrams by bicycle, weaving through traffic with a messenger cap too big for her head. One delivery is to a woman who bursts into tears after reading it. The girl doesn't ask why, she just nods and pedals to the next address. And yet, despite the sweat and soreness, there is something deeply human in these hours. A man lifts a crate for a stranger. A woman slips a coin into a beggar's cup. A boy helps his sister tie her shoelaces. Small mercies in a world that offers few. As 5 o'clock approaches, the sound of quitting time begins to build. Machines wind down, hammers fall still, ledgers are closed, aprons are untied. The day has not ended, but its hardest stretch is over. Workers file out of buildings with stiff legs and sore backs. Some light cigarettes. Others head straight to the saloon, the bakery, the church, or just home. If home means anything more than a mattress, a meal and momentary peace. A trolley clangs past and someone cheers half-heartedly. A man on a stoop nods to a passing stranger. A child waves at a conductor. These are the rituals of release, the sacred seconds where labour gives way, if only briefly, to life. The workday may have ended, but the day is far from done. Evening doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in on tired shoulders, slipping between factory gates and drifting through the alleyways of tenement housing. In early 1900s America, the post-work hours are a complex blend of exhaustion, domestic duty, stolen pleasures, and quiet defiance. The labour of the day may pause, but life itself still demands attention. The clang of quitting time, whether it's a whistle, a bell, or just the sun slanting lower through dirty windows, marks a sacred turning point. For the men and women clocking out of coal mines, textile mills, stockyards, and steel foundries, it's the one moment when a door opens to something else. Family, food, rest, or a bit of laughter, if they're lucky. In industrial cities, the sidewalks crowd instantly. Workers pour into the streets like steam from a vent. Boots slap against cobblestones, and voices rise in a tired low hum. A few stretch their backs. One man cradles his wrist. Another woman shakes the ache from her fingers and mutters about the stitch quota being raised again. The air is different now. Not cleaner, not gentler, just changed. It smells of coal smoke and horse manure, fried onions and cheap cigars. Children dart between legs, chasing sticks or stray dogs. Vendors reappear with carts full of roasted peanuts, fresh bread, and hot potato cakes. A nickel might buy you a bit of joy if you know where to look. Homeward-bound workers form patterns. Some head to boarding houses where dinner is already boiling, soup thick with barley and onions. Others turn towards saloons, smoke houses or billiard halls, places where the day's labour dissolves into drink, jokes, or just sitting still without being yelled at. Mainstream fact. By 1910, the United States had over 300,000 saloons, especially in working-class neighbourhoods. These weren't just places to drink, they were community centres, informal employment offices, and sometimes even makeshift banks. Men would get mail there, pick up day labour leads, or escape the pressures of home life, even briefly. Inside the saloon, the air is thick and electric. Brass railings shine in the gaslight. The bar smells of spilled ale and sour wood. Men toss back shots of rye, slap cards on the table, and swap stories louder than they need to. A bartender polishes the same glass for 10 minutes while pretending not to listen. Someone plays a piano in the corner. Ragtime, badly, but the crowd doesn't care. Just down the block, a group of women gathers on a stoop peeling potatoes and gossiping. They talk about laundry prices, Cousin Ruth's mysterious visitor, and the neighbour's son who still hasn't come home from the Navy. Their hands move without thought. Peel, slice, drop, repeat. One of them hums an old hymn. The rest fall into rhythm without saying a word. Inside a narrow tenement, a mother prepares dinner with whatever she has. Tonight, cabbage soup and a slice of bread. She tears the bread carefully so that everyone gets a bit of crust. Her children sit on the floor, drawing with charcoal on brown paper sacks. Her husband comes through the door smelling of grease and iron. He kisses her on the cheek. They don't speak for a while. Open scholarly debate. Some historians argue that working-class family structures were deeply disrupted by industrial schedules, especially as more women and children entered the workforce. Others claim these families adapted with surprising resilience, forming tighter bonds through shared labour and mealtime rituals. Diaries and oral histories reveal both strains and strengths, often in the same breath. In rural areas, the rhythm is gentler, but just as relentless. Evening chores begin almost immediately after supper. Chickens are herded back into coops. Cows are milked, tools cleaned, lanterns lit. A boy hauls a bucket of slop to the pigs, while grumbling about how long it takes. He kicks at a rock and misses, and his sister gathers eggs from the coop, counting them aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4. One cracks in her apron. She sighs, wipes her hands on her skirt, and finishes the count anyway. They'll fry the broken one for breakfast. Dinner on the farm is hearty. Cornbread, beans, salt pork, sometimes pie if there's fruit left over from the preserves. They eat quickly, not because they want to, but because there's always more to do. The sun waits for no one. A fringe tidbit. In some farming communities, children were expected to eat in silence, while adults discussed weather patterns, crop yields, or politics. It wasn't considered cruel, it was just how knowledge passed downward. Children listened, absorbed, and learned their place at the table. In boarding houses and lodgings for single workers, dinner is communal. Men from different countries, Polish, Irish, Italian, Russian, sit elbow to elbow, eating boiled sausages, thick stews, and day-old bread. The table is loud, full of accents and laughter, half of which no one understands, but somehow it works. In wealthier homes, the evening unfolds like a stage play. The dining room is lit with chandeliers, silverware clinks against porcelain. A butler stands behind the master of the house. The children speak only when spoken to. Tonight's menu: roast duck, steamed carrots, and lemon pudding. No one talks about money, politics, or the smell drifting in from the tenement streets nearby. In the parlours, gramophones spin wax cylinders, opera, Sousa marches, maybe even ragtime if the lady of the house is feeling modern. Guests sip tea or port. Conversations revolve around the latest Edison invention, European scandals, or why women absolutely shouldn't vote. At least one person brings up phrenology. Everyone nods solemnly. The lines of class, so apparent in the daylight, don't fade at dusk. They deepen. Even the pace of evening is different. In the tenements, life is crammed, urgent. In the suburbs and brownstones, it unfolds like molasses. Children across the country finish homework by dim light. Candle, kerosene, or electric bulb if they're lucky. A boy in Pennsylvania works on a spelling list, mumbling machine, labour, electricity. His sister practices penmanship beside him, each stroke careful like it might change her life. Elsewhere, children go uneducated but not unloved. A father reads a newspaper aloud, stumbling over the long words. A mother teaches her daughter how to patch a sock. A grandmother tells a story about the old country, about wolves and winter and hope. The girl falls asleep halfway through. In hospitals, the evening brings its own rhythm. Nurses change shifts. Linens are folded. A doctor smokes on the back steps, watching the lights flicker in the windows across the street. He wonders whether the patient in room 3 will make it through the night. He hopes he doesn't dream about it again. In brothels, music starts early. Red curtains are drawn. Perfume clouds the air. A woman paints her lips with a careful hand and tries not to think about the letter from her sister. She pins up her hair and smiles into the mirror. Her eyes don't smile back. As twilight fades, gas lamps flicker to life across cities. In places like New York, Chicago, or San Francisco, the streets glow with amber light. A boy sells matches on a corner. A woman sweeps the front of her shop. A cop tips his hat to no one in particular. Mainstream fact: by 1910, many major American cities had adopted public lighting systems, first gas, then electric. Street lamps changed the very nature of urban nightlife, making it safer, supposedly, longer lasting, and more accessible, especially for the growing middle class. In tenements, curtains are drawn against the street noise. A girl washes her face with cold water, ties a ribbon in her hair, and dreams of being a singer. A boy lies on the floor with a dime novel, devouring tales of cowboys, outlaws, and gold. Their father snores in a chair. Their mother darns socks by the last light of the window. And as the sky darkens, America exhales. Not because it's over, but because it has to. The body cannot push forever. The mind cannot run always. So the country lowers its voice, softens its tread, and slips toward the rituals of night. One by one, candles are snuffed. Stoves are banked. Boots are lined near doors. Beds are made, some with fresh sheets, some with old quilts, some with nothing but the floor. And somewhere, in every corner of this vast and contradictory land, someone sits for just a moment. A man on a porch with his pipe. A girl on a rooftop with her knees tucked to her chest. A boy on a stoop humming a song that doesn't have a name. These are the quiet seconds, the stolen ones, the only ones that feel like peace. Tomorrow will come, fast and hungry. But tonight, just for a few hours, America rests. The night deepens, curling around rooftops and alleys, fields and factory rows. Across early 1900s America, stars blink into place above soot-stained towns and sleepy farms, and the country transitions from labour to what little leisure it knows. But this isn't a blanket of calm. This is a tapestry of hushed rituals, lingering chores, late-night shifts, and quiet resistance. For some, the day truly ends now. In rural homes, the last lanterns are extinguished. Children are tucked into narrow beds, sometimes 3 to a mattress, limbs tangled and breath soft. A mother closes the door to the upstairs room and tiptoes to the kitchen. She wipes down the table one final time and checks the bread dough rising in a covered bowl. She runs her hand along the windowsill. All is still. All is clean. She can finally breathe. Out in the barn, a father hangs his coat by a rusted nail. He checks the hinges on the door one last time, runs a hand over the flank of his old mare, and whistles low under his breath. It's a tune from his childhood, one he hasn't sung aloud in years. The horse flicks her ears. He smiles, just barely. In contrast, the cities are not winding down. They are shifting gears. Electric lights glow in certain neighbourhoods, casting shadows on cobbled streets and brick walls. Windows flicker with yellow warmth. The day shift may be home, but the night shift is just getting started. A switchboard operator puts on a fresh blouse and pins her hair into a tidy bun. She carries a biscuit in a handkerchief and eats it standing by the doorway. She won't return until dawn. Her mother nods from the table without speaking. They've done this too many times to require words. In downtown warehouses, night crews sweep in with little fanfare. They punch time cards with calloused fingers. These are the quieter workers, janitors, night watchmen, freight handlers. They're not making history, but they're making sure someone else can. A janitor in St. Louis empties a bucket of murky water and starts again with a clean rag. The office floors must shine by morning. A fringe tidbit. Some night janitors in office buildings developed an informal sign language so they wouldn't need to speak while working, reducing the chance of being overheard by respectable employees staying late. A tap on the radiator meant trouble. A broom turned upside down signalled safe. In the train yards, lanterns swing like fireflies. Engineers and brakemen shout across lines. Steam hisses in the darkness. A boy no older than 14 helps load crates of canned peaches, whistling through a missing tooth. He says he's working for his family. He doesn't say that he likes the quiet more than school. Inside a boarding house, a group of men gather around a chip table. playing dominoes and drinking from a bottle of something that smells like paint thinner. One man sings in Polish, another argues politics, a third stares into the fire thinking about his wife back home in Ireland. He hasn't written to her in weeks. He doesn't know what to say. Elsewhere, a nurse begins her rounds in a hospital lit by kerosene lamps and worry. She checks temperatures, counts breaths, dabs foreheads, room by room, hour by hour. In the hallway, a boy waits outside the room where his mother lies sleeping. He doesn't know what's wrong, only that she hasn't laughed in a while. The nurse gives him a peppermint and tells him to be brave. He doesn't know how. At the same time, a couple in Brooklyn walks arm in arm beneath a flickering street lamp. They pass a shop with a phonograph playing faintly through the window. He hums along. She giggles. They'll be married in the spring. Tonight, though, they just enjoy the way the lamplight turns her hair gold. Mainstream fact. Courtship in the early 1900s was transitioning from formal parlour visits to more casual public outings, thanks in part to urbanisation, mass transit, and inexpensive amusements. Young people began dating outside of the family home, giving rise to early forms of modern dating culture. In parlour rooms across the country, families gather for their final moments of togetherness. The fire crackles. A grandfather smokes a pipe and tells stories that no one believes. A mother knits while the baby snores on her lap. A father reads aloud from a newspaper, stumbling through words like telegraph and legislation, pausing when his children ask questions he can't answer. A boy draws horses on a scrap of paper. A girl pretends her rag doll is a nurse tending to imaginary wounded. They don't know it, but they're reenacting the very world around them, absorbing the worries of adults, reshaping them into something they can understand. In the upper crust neighbourhoods, the lights remain on a little longer. Men sip brandy in leather chairs discussing stocks and Panama. Women sit beneath chandeliers, gossiping about a scandalous cousin who wore ankle-high boots before Memorial Day. A piano tinkles in the next room. No one is listening. Upstairs, the children sleep beneath embroidered quilts. A governess tiptoes from room to room, straightening pillows, tucking in sheets, whispering lullabies in a language they'll forget by morning. She doesn't linger. She's not allowed to. In urban tenements, sleep is more complicated. Walls are thin, beds are shared. The night brings noise, footsteps above, shouting below, a baby crying somewhere down the hall. A man snores loudly on the floor. His wife nudges him. He rolls over. They return to silence. And yet, even here, there are comforts. A girl hides a flower in a book under her pillow. A boy curls around his baby sister like a barrier. A woman murmurs a prayer in Yiddish, her voice barely audible over the squeak of pipes and the occasional rat. Open scholarly debate. Historians continue to debate the quality of life in immigrant-dominated urban housing during this period. Some accounts emphasise resilience, culture and community, while others focus on overcrowding, disease and the psychological toll of poverty. As usual, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, shaped by variables like ethnicity, region, and access to mutual aid networks. Across the landscape, America falls into its nighttime rhythm. In Harlem, a man strums a guitar on a fire escape, singing softly to the empty street. In San Francisco, a Chinese laundress folds the last shirt of the day with perfect corners. In Oklahoma, a boy listens to coyotes howling in the distance and wonders if they ever sleep. In Kansas, a preacher kneels by candlelight, reading scripture to an empty church. His sermon is ready for Sunday. He hopes someone shows up this time, and far out on the plains a homesteader watches the stars. His fire is low, his boots are off, and his legs are sore. He sips from a metal cup. Coffee. Always coffee. He whispers the names of his children back east, one by one, like a spell against loneliness. Back in the city, the last streetcar rattles by, its bell echoing off brick walls. A woman locks the door to her bakery, counting coins in her apron. A newspaper boy sleeps on a pile of yesterday's headlines, ink smudged across his cheek like a second shadow. Even criminals, drunks and night owls have found their corners. A man plays dice in an alley, winning more than he loses. A pickpocket gives his coat to a stray dog before vanishing into the dark. A constable lights a cigarette, tips his hat to the moon and continues his rounds. And then, slowly, the country begins to hush. Children stop fidgeting, mothers stop worrying, lamps are turned down, eyes close, dreams tiptoe in. A woman dreams of a life where her hands don't ache. A man dreams of a machine that lifts steel beams without human help. A girl dreams of snow even though it's July. A boy dreams of being president, or maybe just owning a bike that's actually his. Not every night brings peace. Some go hungry, some sleep cold, some sleep alone, or not at all. But even in hardship there is rhythm. A nation of dreams stacked atop one another like so many stories in a tenement, some sweet, some strange, some broken. The night belongs to everyone and no one. It hides truths and reveals others. It softens sharp edges, quiets harsh tongues, and turns even the loudest cities into lullabies, if only for a few hours. And beneath it all, the pulse of the early 1900s still beats, slow, steady, restless, hopeful, alive. The world of early 1900s, America, as it sleeps, or tries to, doesn't stop. Even in darkness, gears turn. Quiet becomes industry's lull, not its pause. And in those late-night hours where silence breathes between ticking clocks and distant whistles, another America begins to stir. The nocturnal nation of those who work when others rest, those who create when no one is watching, and those who simply cannot sleep. In factories with 24-hour operations, steel, glass, oil, rail, night crews are deep into their shift. These are not the loud, raucous teams of daylight. They are leaner, more focused, shadows moving between machines that glow orange in the dark. A man named Al feeds coal into a furnace with one arm in a sling. No choice, he needs the pay. The night foreman nods to him but says nothing. Talking is rare on night shift. Eyes do more work than mouths. You learn to read a person's whole mood in the way they set down a wrench. Nearby, a glass-blowing team moulds bottles for medicine. The mould is hot, the air humid. One wrong move, and you've burned yourself, or ruined the entire batch. There's a girl here too, Lena, just 15. She lied about her age, her father's gone, her mother's sick. The work is hard, but she's fast, and that matters more than birth date. Mainstream fact. Although child labour laws were slowly gaining traction, enforcement was spotty at best. In 1900, over 18% of children between the ages of 10 and 15 were employed, many in dangerous jobs with long hours, especially in industries like coal, textiles, and glassmaking. In printing presses, linotype operators clack away in the dark, preparing morning editions. Newspapers are still king, and deadlines never sleep. A man named Bennett fixes a jammed key while sipping lukewarm coffee from a tin mug. He hasn't eaten since noon. His pay won't stretch much farther. In the corner, a proofreader dozes for a second. Just a blink. He jolts awake, spills ink, and curses under his breath. Across town, his wife lies awake, wondering if he's warm, if he's fed, if he still loves her. She'll never ask, he'll never say, but each suspects the answer. In hotel kitchens, the graveyard cooks begin breakfast prep before the guests have finished dreaming. Bacon sizzles, coffee percolates, loaves are pulled from ovens. A woman peels potatoes with terrifying speed. She hums under her breath, something soft and old. She has a daughter at home who wants to be a dancer. She's never seen her dance. Elsewhere, innovation burns the midnight oil. In makeshift garages and cluttered basements, inventors tinker beneath flickering bulbs. In Detroit, a young man named Henry is sketching designs for an assembly line. In Dayton, the Wright brothers examine wind tunnel data by lamplight. And in Menlo Park, something strange glows behind closed doors. Electrical dreams of a man named Edison, who insists the world will be lit forever. Open scholarly debate. While many credit Thomas Edison with inventing modern light, others argue his genius lay more in refining, marketing and monetizing the ideas of others, including Nikola Tesla and Joseph Swan. The tangled history of electricity is still a source of debate and resentment in some scholarly circles. In more modest homes, night-time is a suggestion, not a reality. A tailor stitches by candlelight, rushing to finish a suit promised by dawn. A mother in a boarding house darns socks for her 3 boys. A man with insomnia writes poems on butcher paper, tearing them into pieces when he's done. Creation isn't always pretty. Some write letters, others rewrite them. The post is too slow for hasty confessions. A girl in Oklahoma drafts her 10th apology to a friend she can't forget. A woman in Vermont sends a love letter to a man who never received the first 2. Mail is a lottery. Emotions are postage-stamped and fragile. In brothels and music halls, the nightlife glows brighter. Cabarets hum with laughter and clinking glasses. Jazz, still in its infancy, snakes its way through back rooms and parlour lounges, seducing ears not yet ready for its heat. A trumpet player named Elijah plays 3 sets a night, sweat flying from his brow. He doesn't read music, just follows the melody inside him. The crowd cheers. He smiles once. A fringe tidbit. In some southern cities, jazz musicians would play rent parties, informal gatherings where tenants charged admission to help cover rent. These parties were cultural lifelines for black communities, blending music, food, politics, and storytelling under a single roof. Elsewhere, less glamorous gatherings take shape. In laundries, Chinese immigrants scrub and rinse under flickering gaslights. The steam rises like ghosts. One man hums an opera from home. His co-workers don't know the words, but they know the tune. They hum along. No one talks about the anti-Chinese riots last winter. No one has to. On farms, night is rarely restful. A sick calf needs tending. A storm threatens the roof. A well runs low. A father rises from bed without waking his wife and checks the fields by lantern light. His boots crunch frost. His breath fogs the glass of the barn. The silence is immense. It fills him with something he can't name. Meanwhile, in the cities, newsboys begin to stir before dawn. These are the children of the in-between hours. They wake before light, shuffle through back alleys to the press rooms and collect stacks of morning papers. Some wear coats too big, others wear none at all. A boy with a gap-toothed grin practices yelling, "Extra! War in the East!" even though there's no war, yet. In boarding schools and seminaries, students study by gaslight. Latin declensions, Greek philosophy, the Bible. A boy sneaks a dime novel beneath his textbook. He reads of pirates, bullets, and buried treasure. He dreams of none of it, but the pages make the cold room feel less cruel. Not everyone who stays awake at night does so by choice. In sanatoriums, patients twist beneath blankets. The cough of tuberculosis breaks the stillness. A nurse offers tea and a warm cloth. The patient asks if they'll live to see spring. The nurse lies gently. Mainstream fact: tuberculosis, called consumption, was the leading cause of death in the United States in the early 1900s. Sanatoriums were built in rural areas to isolate and treat patients, often with little more than fresh air, rest, and hope. On battlefields beyond America's borders, in the Philippines, in Cuba, and along the lines of empire, American soldiers keep watch. Some write in journals, others clean rifles. Many think of home, the smell of fried apples, the warmth of a kitchen stove, the clatter of Sunday shoes on wood floors. Back at home, some parents sit up waiting for children who haven't come back. Not runaways, just late, or lost in conversation, or walking too slowly under starlight. A father checks the window. A mother folds a blanket and leaves it on the couch. They don't panic, not yet. But they notice the clock. In observatories and universities, scientists chart stars and record weather patterns. The world is changing, they say. The temperature shifts. The wind behaves differently. A professor in Boston predicts storms with more accuracy than anyone expects. No one outside the department believes him. He keeps records anyway. And beneath all of this, beneath the labour, the music, the lamplight and longing, the earth continues its spin. Quietly, faithfully, unspectacularly. The night is still alive, but it's beginning to tilt toward morning. A girl in Montana stirs from sleep. Her dream is half finished, but she won't remember it anyway. She turns over and sighs. A dog barks in Missouri. A horse shifts in Maine. A baby cries in Georgia, and her mother hums to calm her, too tired to stand. The sky begins to tint blue at the edges, like paper dipped in water. And so the night ends, not all at once, but in soft threads of motion. A lantern turned off, a blanket pulled up, a poem finished, a whistle blown. America, even when sleeping, is never still. Its stories unfold in every second, even in silence. And with morning just a whisper away, it begins to stretch. Limbs stiff, eyes blinking, breath held for the day ahead. It will rise again. It always does. The first hint of dawn is barely a rumour in the sky, just a thinning of stars, a blush behind chimneys, a pale sigh over wheat fields. But for early 1900s, America, the new day is already underway. This is a country that rarely sleeps, and never sleeps in. Somewhere, a rooster crows. Somewhere else, a whistle shrieks. And with it, the wheels begin turning again. Farmers are first, they always are. Before the sun even cracks the horizon, boots are already stomping into frostbitten dirt, barn doors creaking open to welcome the breath of animals and the bite of morning air. In Kansas, a boy no older than 12 climbs into a loft and tosses hay down to the cows below. He sneezes once, twice, doesn't stop. Twice. There's too much to do. His father is already at the pump, sloshing water into troughs. The older man says nothing but nods once as the boy passes. That nod is everything. Approval, partnership, pride. Words are too slow at this hour. In the hen house, a girl in braids collects warm eggs in her apron. She hums something sweet, something old. A lullaby turned hymn, or maybe the other way around. She likes the hush of early chores, the way even the chickens don't cluck too loud yet. The family eats better when she gathers more eggs. That matters. In the farmhouse, the mother lights the stove, stirring oats with one hand and pressing a baby to her chest with the other. She hasn't slept more than 3 hours straight in weeks. The bread she started last night is already rising. By noon she'll have fed 7 people, mended 2 shirts, boiled lye soap, and cleared the root cellar of mice. But right now she just watches the pot and lets her mind float. A minute of peace, wrapped in steam. Mainstream fact. In 1900, over 60% of Americans still lived in rural areas, and family farms were the economic and social heart of many regions. Daily life was shaped by seasons, animals, and survival, not clocks. Electricity, running water, and mechanized equipment were rare luxuries, even in prosperous communities. Back in the cities, the earliest risers are already on the move. Milkmen rattle down cobbled streets, metal jugs clanking in rhythm. Newsboys shout headlines that may or may not be true. Bakers lift loaves from brick ovens with long wooden paddles, flour floating like smoke in the dim light. Steam escapes from manholes. Rats retreat into shadows. Streetcars begin their rounds. Sparks fly from electric lines overhead. The city hums itself awake. A constable yawns as he ends his shift. A delivery boy gulps hot coffee from a bottle. 2 factory girls walk arm in arm toward the mill, gossiping already. Their hands are still pink from last night's soap. In immigrant neighbourhoods, life stirs cautiously. A Russian grandmother sweeps her stoop with a bundle of twigs. An Italian mother checks the sauce she left simmering all night. A Jewish tailor rolls open his shop gate, greeting no one but nodding to every passerby. Respect isn't loud. In the boarding houses, the noise begins from the inside out. Chamber pots sloshed, boots laced, floors creaking under hasty footsteps. Men tighten suspenders. Women pin up hair. No one talks until coffee appears. The church bells chime 6 times. That's not the time. That's a command. Elsewhere, people rise from beds made of less. Floorboards, hay, bundle coats. A man sleeping under a park bench rubs his eyes, checks his pockets, and stands. His shoes are wet. He sighs, but walks. Walking is what the day demands. In kitchens across America, the breakfast menu depends entirely on wealth. For the rich, it's eggs with cream, ham slices, toast, stewed fruit, tea in porcelain cups. For the poor, it's oats or cold potatoes. Maybe bread, maybe not. One boy dips stale crusts in water to soften them, pretending it's soup. He eats with his eyes closed. A fringe tidbit. In some urban households, particularly among the poor, families would share a communal spoon or even a single tin cup. It wasn't lack of etiquette, it was lack of options, and remarkably it worked. Teachers arrive early at schools, sweeping ash from stoves and scratching lesson plans onto blackboards. A chalk-smeared woman with a tight bun writes, "Today, simple fractions." She sighs and straightens her dress. She will teach 30 children today. She will earn less than the man who delivers coal to the school. School children appear like mushrooms after rain, small, sudden, quiet until they aren't. Wool coats, patched pants, braids tied with string. Some bring lunches in tin pails. Others bring nothing. A few don't come at all. They're needed at home, or at work, or in bed, recovering from colds that medicine can't quite cure. Open scholarly debate. The turn of the century saw major efforts to expand public education, but attendance varied widely by region, race, and class. Some historians praise the period as a foundation of mass literacy, while others highlight the deep inequities in access, particularly for girls and children of colour. The record is both inspiring and unsettling. In factories, whistles blow. Not yet 7, and already machines grown to life. Workers pour through gates, blinking, yawning, resigned. They know every inch of the floor, every smell, every sound. The foreman doesn't greet them. He just points. A girl starts her loom. A man tightens bolts. A boy, small for 15, crawls beneath the gears to scrape out debris. It's dangerous work. He hums a song so he won't think about it. His fingers are fast. That's all that matters. Upstairs, clerks unlock offices, typewriters are uncovered, ledgers opened, coffee sipped. The world of paper and ink begins its slow churn. A secretary adjusts her collar, sighs at her blotter, and sharpens her pencil with a knife she keeps hidden in her purse. In homes both grand and meagre, the day presses forward. A mother braids her daughter's hair while reminding her not to talk back to the teacher. A father tells his son to find work by noon, or not to come back. A grandfather teaches a toddler to whistle. A neighbour asks to borrow flour. Again. All over the country, routines unfurl like clockwork. In barbershops, the first shave of the day begins. In saloons, the back door opens for delivery. In churches, the janitor lights candles and says a private prayer that today won't bring another funeral. Mainstream fact. The early 20th century was marked by waves of influenza, measles, typhoid, and tuberculosis, with little access to vaccines or reliable treatment. Churches and funeral parlours often worked in tandem, with clergy doubling as both spiritual guides and unofficial grief counsellors. By now the sun is up. Fully. Its light spills across city roofs and prairie grass, shipyards and mountain cabins. It warms faces, melts frost, awakens birds, softens fear, but it also exposes every crack, every debt, every scar from yesterday. There is no hiding in daylight, and yet people face it anyway. They carry their buckets, their books, their burdens. They ride the trolleys, they chop the wood, they sell the apples. They tie the laces of a child's shoes and walk out into the world without knowing what it will demand from them. That's courage, quiet and ordinary. By mid-morning, everything is in motion. Bakers are on their second batch. Butchers have salted half a cow. Seamstresses are hunched over machines. Babies cry. Priests walk. Coalmen shovel. No one has enough sleep, but somehow everyone is awake. A girl stares out a classroom window and dreams of moving pictures. A boy scribbles comic strips on his spelling test. A woman writes a letter she'll never send. A man pockets a coin he found on the street and decides it's a sign. Maybe it is. All across America, hopes simmer alongside porridge pots and factory steam. And above it all, the same sky stretches out, watched by hawks and airplanes, clouds and soot, the sun and the slow-moving moon. It holds everything. The prayers, the plans, the mornings that feel just like every morning before. But this is how history happens, not with cannon fire, but with coffee poured at dawn. Not in bold speeches, but in a father lifting his child to kiss her goodbye. Not in headlines, but in habits. Because America in the early 1900s is a machine. Yes, but also a garden. Every day, seeds of progress are planted in dusty lots and greasy shops, on fire escapes and front porches. Most won't grow, some will, some, and decades from now, someone will look back and say it all began here, in the clatter and hush of a country waking up. As the morning unfolds into late day, the momentum of early 1900s America accelerates. Streets now teem with horse-drawn wagons, clattering trolleys, and pedestrians locked in a synchronized dance of grit and urgency. In small towns and burgeoning metropolises alike, the hours between noon and evening carry the full weight of a nation's ambition, fueled by sweat, routine, and the quiet insistence of progress. In a Detroit workshop, a man named Elias adjusts the oil flow on a stamping machine that shapes metal panels for an automobile still considered a novelty. Around him, the air is thick with heat and iron dust. Sweat streaks his face, but his fingers move with practiced grace. He's been on shift since dawn. By lunchtime, he's handled over 400 parts, and yet he's barely noticed the hours slip by. Over in the office block 2 floors up, a stenographer clicks away at a Remington typewriter. Her wrists ache. Her corset pinches. But the boss likes her typing. She's quick, and, more importantly, quiet. She skips lunch to finish dictation, hoping it earns her an extra $1 in her pay envelope come Friday. She eats half a pickle out of her purse and keeps working. The lunch hour in working-class districts is often no more than 20 minutes and never quiet. Outside factory gates, vendors shout the day's offerings: corned beef sandwiches, pickled eggs, hot tamales from a Mexican man who nods at every passerby whether they buy or not. He knows their faces now, and they know his song, half Spanish, half something else, always sung off-key. Mainstream fact: by 1910, immigrant vendors and food carts had become staples in most major American cities, especially near factories and docks. For many workers, they were the only affordable hot meals available during the day, and for immigrants, it was one of the few accessible entrepreneurial paths. Some workers don't eat at all. They use the break to nap against brick walls or write letters home. A boy of maybe 12, soot on his hands, draws a picture in the dirt: a horse with wings. His brother sees it, grins and erases it with a boot. The boy doesn't mind. He'll draw another tomorrow. In rural America, the fields are bustling. Men hoist scythes, women drag baskets heavy with turnips or corn, children chase chickens with squeals of laughter, or boredom. It depends on the day. Lunch is often eaten right there: bread with lard, a slice of apple, water from a tin cup. A boy sits under a tree and stares at the clouds. He imagines one looks like a ship and names it the Liberty. Then he forgets, because his father calls him back to the ruse. In county schoolhouses, students return from recess with muddy shoes and flushed faces. A teacher claps twice sharply and the room settles. Arithmetic resumes. Geography follows. But the real learning today happens when a girl leans over to whisper the definition of abolition to her neighbour, who missed class last week because her mother was sick. The whisper is barely audible, but it carries more kindness than any lesson plan. A fringe tidbit. Some rural one-room schools used whispering benches as punishments. 2 students who talked too much were made to sit side by side in silence, often holding hands until they apologised or giggled too much to be angry anymore. Oddly enough, many friendships and a few marriages began this way. Back in urban apartments, mothers tend to both laundry and babies, with a kind of multitasking that borders on miraculous. Wet clothes flap across lines strung from window to window, crossing alleys like bunting made from survival. In one 4th-floor walk-up, a woman boils water on a coal stove, rocking her youngest child with her foot while spooning broth into her father-in-law's mouth. He hasn't spoken since his second stroke, but he hums when the soup is hot. Across the hallway, a tailor works from home. His window is open. Music drifts in from somewhere below, a phonograph maybe, or a street musician. He stitches buttonholes to the beat, fingers quick as birds. He once dreamed of opening his own shop. He still might. In department stores, middle-class shoppers float through aisles of lace gloves, tin toys, and cocoa tins embossed with portraits of trustworthy men. A clerk straightens display boxes with aching knees and a smile pasted on her lips. A child smears jam on a cash register. Her mother doesn't notice. She's eyeing a corset marked "half off today only." Open scholarly debate. While department stores are hailed as early symbols of consumerism and female independence, some historians question whether they truly empowered working women, or merely masked wage disparities and long hours under a polished veneer. Still, many women found dignity and autonomy in the world of retail, even if only on the surface. On construction sites, lunch is over quickly. Crews return to framing buildings, hauling bricks, and balancing on steel beams without harnesses. A man named George, Irish-born and barrel-chested, swings a hammer while singing a protest song from the old country. The others join in on the chorus out of habit more than belief, but the sound echoes beautifully against stone. Further downtown, an elevator boy stares at nothing as he rides up and down, his uniform itches. The copper dial above him clicks steadily, floor after floor. He wonders what it feels like to have a desk, to stay still, to be served instead of serving. But he says nothing. He just presses the button again. In a sewing factory, women hunch over machines, needles whirring. The air smells of oil and sweat. A supervisor paces between rows. No one looks up. A girl pricks her finger but keeps sewing. She'll suck the blood off later. Every minute matters. Mainstream fact. The garment industry employed hundreds of thousands of women in the early 1900s, many under brutal conditions. Factories often demanded 12-hour shifts with minimal breaks and deducted pay for minor infractions. The infamous Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire in 1911 would later expose these conditions to the nation. In the neighbourhoods just beyond downtown, life pulses slower but no less urgently. A barber sweeps hair from the floor with swift practice strokes. A man in the corner reads a paper aloud for the others. Roosevelt warns of monopolies. A boy asks what that means. No one answers. At the docks, labourers unload crates of bananas, coffee, gunny sacks filled with goods from places most of them will never see. A stevedore yells directions in 3 languages. A crate crashes. No one flinches. They've seen worse. One man spits over the side and lights a cigarette. Another stretches his back and counts the hours until he can go home and sleep. Or drink. Whichever comes first. In homes above bakeries, behind stables and between bricked alleyways, housewives fold laundry and watch windows. They're waiting for something. Anything. A letter, a cart, a visitor, a knock. The days can stretch long when no one comes by. A dog barks. A child laughs. They smile at the sound, then keep folding. Teenagers sneak cigarettes behind garages. A girl kisses a boy she's not supposed to. They talk about running away to California. They won't. But the talking matters. It makes everything feel possible. Even in the jails and asylums, those institutions hidden from polite company, the afternoon lingers. A man in a padded cell sings hymns no one taught him. A nurse scribbles on a clipboard. A prisoner writes his name on the wall over and over. Outside, life goes on. Inside, it waits. A music teacher practices arpeggios in her parlour, stopping every few bars to fix a student's hand position. "Wrists high, dear," she whispers. Even Mozart needed practice. A delivery boy cycles up a long hill, cursing under his breath but smiling when the wind hits his face. The package he's carrying is for a woman who always gives him 2 pennies instead of 1. That small kindness is enough to push harder, and through it all the sun tilts westward. The angle of light sharpens. Shadows grow long and strange. Shopkeepers glance at clocks. Teachers assign last-minute homework. A factory whistle groans. Somewhere a chicken is plucked for supper. Somewhere else, a woman adds water to stretch her stew just 1 more day. Because this late afternoon, this golden stretch between labour and rest, is where lives are built. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it is enduring. Every brick laid, every book opened, every thread stitched is another thread in the larger quilt of American life. The country doesn't pause, not yet. There are still mouths to feed, floors to mop, carts to unload, letters to write, dreams to chase. It is ordinary, yes, but it is real. And in the end, that's what keeps the wheels turning. Not the great speeches or the grand inventions, but the thousands of small moments that make up a single day. The quiet strength, the stubborn hope, the tired, steady hands. The last hours of daylight descend like a soft curtain. By 5 o'clock, a golden haze settles over dusty streets and tobacco fields, railroad crossings and crumbling porches. The late afternoon slips into early evening, and with it comes a collective sigh, part relief, part ritual, as America shifts from labour to return, from motion to reflection. In tenement buildings, the sound of dinner echoes up stairwells, pots clanging, water boiling, knives tapping rhythmically on worn boards. The scent of onions frying in lard mingles with coal smoke and bread crusts. In one narrow kitchen, a mother in a gingham dress wipes flour from her hands and turns to stir a pot of beans. Her daughter sets the table with 3 chipped plates and no cutlery. A baby bangs a spoon against the floor. There's always 1 spoon. In the row house next door, a Hungarian family crowds around a card table set too close to the wall. The father ladles out stew while recounting something about work. His hands wave dramatically. No one's sure if he's joking or not. The children giggle, and the mother shoos them with a flick of her apron. She's tired, but the laughter makes it easier. In wealthier homes, gas chandeliers flicker on. Parlours glow. Tables are set by domestic help with crystal glasses and linen napkins folded into swans. A man in a waistcoat reads aloud from a telegram about commodity prices while carving a roast. His wife nods politely, uninterested. Their son hides a slingshot in his sock for later mischief. His sister hums tunelessly into her soup. Mainstream fact. The early 20th century marked a growing divide in living standards between social classes. While some families dined with silver forks and discussed stock dividends, many others survived on cabbage soup and prayed their rent would not rise with the seasons. In mining towns and lumber camps, dinner is served in long mess halls, rows of men, dirt still crusted on their knuckles, devouring meatloaf, potatoes, and weak coffee. A cook rings a bell with a greasy ladle and shouts, "Seconds if you want 'em!" Someone cheers. Another slumps over his tray, asleep before his last bite. Over in New York, dock workers arrive home one by one, boots echoing through stairwells, shoulders sagging under the weight of the day. A wife kisses her husband's cheek, brushing off a bit of ash. He grunts, wipes his hands on his pants and sits. No words are needed. She's already ladling soup, a fringe tidbit. In certain Lower East Side apartment buildings, residents created impromptu rooftop dining clubs in summer months. With kitchens sweltering, families would bring chairs, pots, and plates to the rooftops, sharing food and breeze alike. Sometimes there was music, often there was gossip. It was survival elevated, literally. In the countryside, the evening meal is heavier. Farmhands need to replace what they've burned. Cornbread is buttered, fried pork thickens the air with its scent. Biscuits are baked in cast iron. The children eat first, then the father, then the mother, often standing with a plate balanced on one hip and a toddler on the other. Outside, cows low as they are herded into barns. Chickens flutter toward their coop. A dog lies beneath the porch, ears twitching at distant sounds. The sun stretches across wheat like a last blessing. On the reservation, dinner is more solemn. A grandmother stirs hominy while two boys chase each other barefoot in the dirt. A young woman prepares fry bread and sings a song she half remembers from childhood. There is laughter here, yes, but also weight, memory, loss. Hope sharpened into silence. In black communities across the South, families gather over rice, beans, and stories. A father speaks of his day at the sawmill. A mother retells a tale of Brewer Rabbit, pausing for effect so the children giggle right on cue. The food is humble, the love is not. Open scholarly debate. Scholars continue to explore how oral traditions in African American households served as both resistance and preservation during the post-Reconstruction era. Stories, recipes, and spirituals passed across generations often held encoded histories, acts of defiance, pride, and survival cloaked in allegory and rhyme. Elsewhere, businesses begin to close. Storefronts are shuttered, closed signs flipped. An old man counts the till behind a drugstore counter. A butcher sharpens his knives not for use but for ritual. A seamstress folds one last hem, her fingers sore but satisfied. Street lamps buzz to life, each a small declaration against night. Children linger outside a little longer, their games growing slower, quieter. A stickball game ends with someone yelling, "Last one in is a rotten egg," a declaration as old as dust. Teenagers sneak onto fire escapes to talk about dreams, California, music, college, any escape from the tight seams of their neighbourhood. One boy confesses he wants to be a writer. His friend laughs, then stops. "You could, though." The boy smiles in the dark. In a boarding house, two sisters eat saltine crackers and apple slices in their shared room. One is studying shorthand by candlelight. The other is writing a letter to a soldier she's never met. Just a pen pal from an ad in a back page. Still, she wears her nicest ribbon when writing. In churches, the last rays of light filter through stained glass as evening services begin. Hymns echo in half-filled pews. A preacher speaks gently, less fire and brimstone, more balm for the weary. A widow clutches her handbag and closes her eyes, grateful for the quiet. Mainstream fact, evening church services, or vespers, were common in Protestant communities at the turn of the century. Often quieter than morning services, they provided working-class congregants, especially women, a rare moment of spiritual and social refuge. At the hospital, a nurse on the evening shift adjusts her cap and sighs. The halls are quieter now, less bustle, more murmurs. A patient groans, another sleeps. Somewhere down the corridor a baby is born. A first cry echoes through the ward. No one applauds, but everyone hears it. In saloons and beer halls the evening energy builds. Men gather at tables, clinking glasses, talking over fiddle tunes or bar-top pianos. A man wins a hand of poker and grins with missing teeth. A bartender tells a joke for the 4th time that day, and it still earns a laugh. Down an alley, a teenager sells papers shouting, "Fire on the west side! Extra! The fire's already out, but the papers must be sold. He pockets 2 nickels and buys a bottle of soda water from a corner stand. It's warm. He doesn't care. In the theatres, lights dim. The orchestra warms up. A velvet curtain rises to reveal a vaudeville act. Tap dancers, acrobats, a juggler who balances 6 plates on his chin. The crowd roars. In a far corner, a young girl clutches her ticket stub and thinks, "Someday, I'll be up there." Outside the theatre, a homeless man watches the marquee letters flicker. He doesn't read them. He watches the crowd, smiling, chattering, fed. He dreams of stew and a bed with no nails sticking out. On trains rattling across the country, from Boston to Chicago, St. Louis to Omaha, passengers settle in. Some read, others watch the darkened countryside rush by. A mother lulls her baby to sleep with the rhythm of the rails. A conductor checks his watch. On time, for once. As darkness deepens, households prepare for night. Dishes are washed. Boots are lined near doors. Children are bathed with warm cloths and chamomile. A father sits on the edge of his child's bed, retelling a story of pirates and sea beasts, inventing new twists just to hear the giggle. The windows go dark, one by one. In a 2-room shack near the Mississippi, a woman finishes writing in her journal. She writes about her neighbour's new calf, about the sunflowers she saw blooming near the fence, about her sister's last letter. Small things, but they matter. Back in the city, lamps are turned down, locks clicked shut, beds turned down. A man leans against a windowsill smoking the last cigarette of the day. His wife scolds him half-heartedly from the kitchen. He smiles just enough. A boy reads by flashlight under his blanket. A girl whispers prayers for every member of her family, twice, just in case. A dog circles 3 times before curling up. A cat disappears into the night. And finally, as the last trace of twilight fades into navy blue, the world prepares for sleep once again. But not all of it. Some will work, some will watch, some will weep, and some will dream. Wild, strange, beautiful dreams built from the quiet courage of another ordinary day. Night falls fully now, not with ceremony but with a slow, familiar hush. Darkness spreads gently over rooftops, cornfields, tenements, and factory rows, dimming the colours of the day into shades of blue and grey. Lamps flicker in windows like stars that forgot to rise. And in this final descent of the day, America begins again its slow drift into rest. Or at least, its attempt at it. In most households, bedtime is not a singular moment, but a gradual process, stitched together from small rituals and worn routines. Children are tucked in beneath patchwork quilts. Fathers check the door latches once, then again. Mothers blow out the last candle, exhaling with the flame. Grandparents murmur a final word to God, or to memory, or to no one at all. In the cold bedrooms of Nebraska farmhouses, children curl under shared covers, feet seeking warmth from each other. The wind outside howls like a warning. Inside, the stillness is deep. In one room, a boy stares at the ceiling, counting cracks like stars. In another, a girl clutches a rag doll missing one eye. She whispers secrets into its fabric ear, confessions that no one else gets to hear. In urban row houses, the end of the day comes with creaking floorboards and the distant shouts of drunks passing in the alley. A young mother rocks her infant in a chair she inherited from her own mother. The baby's breath slows. The mother keeps rocking, not for the baby, but for herself. A widow in Philadelphia kneels beside her bed, one knee aching worse than usual. She prays, as she always does, not for miracles, but for a peaceful end. She folds her hands, closes her eyes, and falls asleep with her forehead resting on the edge of the mattress. It's not the first time. Mainstream fact. In 1900, the average life expectancy in the United States hovered around 47 years. Shorter still for labourers, immigrants, and minorities. Death was a constant presence, not cloaked behind hospital walls, but visible in the routines of family life, religious practices, and evening prayer. Elsewhere, sleep is harder to come by. In firehouses, men lie in bunk rows, boots neatly placed by poles. They doze lightly, always ready to leap up at the next clang of the bell. One man dreams of drowning, another of falling. When the bell finally rings at 2:17 a.m., they're already halfway to their coats. On trains crossing the Midwest, passengers drift in and out of slumber as the rhythm of the track soothes and rocks. A young woman clutches her valise as she sleeps, chin on chest, dreaming of her sister in Denver, a promise of work and maybe of love. The porter walks past her quietly, gently adjusting a shade so the moonlight won't wake her. A fringe tidbit. In the early 1900s, overnight trains often offered a women-only car, complete with extra attendants and stricter lighting rules, considered both a safety feature and a polite nod to modesty. Yet some women still chose the general cars, preferring the chaos and colour to the quiet. Across the city, insomniacs and dreamers find other ways to pass the hours. A man in Boston writes letters to a girl who's married someone else. He doesn't send them. He keeps them in a shoebox beneath the bed. He's filled 3 boxes. In Chicago, a black jazz pianist plays alone in a closed club, practicing a new piece he swears will change everything. His fingers fly, his heart pounds, but no one hears it except the ghosts of patrons long gone. The bartender sweeps the floor and smiles. Back in the steel mills, the night shift is deep into its rhythm. Sparks fly like fireflies. Men shout over the din. Sweat still pours, even though the air is cold. A boy too young to vote guides molten iron into moulds with trembling arms. His father works beside him. Neither speaks. In New Orleans, a street preacher on a corner bellows verses into the dark. No crowd, no collection plate. Just him, the sky, and the hope that someone, somewhere, is listening. Behind him, 2 lovers kiss in the shadow of a boarded window. In asylums, patients stir in sleep. Some mutter, some scream, some sing lullabies to themselves. A nurse makes quiet rounds with a lantern, her face pale and tired. She adjusts blankets, not just for comfort, but for dignity. She hums, though she doesn't realise it. Open scholarly debate. Historical interpretations of early 20th century mental health care vary. While some institutions did provide humane treatment relative to the standards of the time, many were overcrowded, underfunded, and deeply flawed. Modern historians continue to argue over which figures were true pioneers and which were merely custodians of neglect. In a log cabin on the edge of Wyoming, a trapper sharpens his knife one last time, then places it carefully by the door. His only companion, a dog, snores at his feet. He stares into the fire and remembers the face of a woman he met once in Cheyenne. He wonders what she's doing now. The streets are quieter now. The streetcars have stopped. The newspaper boys are asleep. The gaslights flicker low, and even the saloons grow hushed. An occasional cough echoes from an open window. A horse neighs in a distant stable. Then, nothing. Night has settled fully. And yet, even as most of the country lies in slumber, something stirs. In tenement apartments, in barns, in tiny rented rooms above shops, in attic studios, and on beds of hay or piles of rags, dreams begin to take form. Some dreams are bold and colourful. Vaudeville stages, inventions, escape. Others are quiet. A healthy child, a day without pain, a letter from someone long gone. A little girl dreams of becoming a teacher. A boy sees himself in uniform marching toward a future he doesn't yet understand. A mother dreams of her wedding day. A father dreams of a better harvest. A woman dreams of her childhood home. A man dreams of nothing for the first time in years. And far beyond, under the vast stretch of sky, America exhales. Its people, weary from the day, rest now. Not all peacefully, not all with comfort, but rest nonetheless. Because rest is resistance. Rest is hope. Rest is what allows the nation to wake again tomorrow and do it all again. And so, beneath the blanket of stars, behind every closed eye and quiet breath, the great story of this country continues, not in parades or fireworks, but in the small, simple miracle of surviving another day. The wind shifts. A dog barks once. Somewhere a baby wakes and is quickly soothed. A candle guttering finally gives out. Then, quiet. Real. Full. Sacred quiet. And now, dear night owl, the story slows, like a train easing into its station, like footsteps softening on gravel, like breath deepening beneath warm blankets. The world of early 1900s America dims gently, just as it once did in kitchens and parlours, schoolrooms and steel mills. The clatter of the day fades into memory, and only the pulse of sleep remains. Imagine now those empty streets under gaslight, the faint scent of coal smoke in the air, the echo of a distant whistle slipping away. Inside the homes we've wandered, the curtains are drawn, the lamps extinguished. Some beds are crowded, some are empty. Some are cold, but all hold stories. And as you drift, maybe you carry a few of those stories with you. A girl dreaming of chalkboards and sunbonnets, a boy humming tunes in a freight yard, a woman in curlers counting the pennies she'll stretch into tomorrow's supper. They were here, they mattered, and in the softness of this moment, they still do. Let the rhythm of their lives, gentle, weary, brave, settle into your breath. Let your thoughts fall quiet like ash from a chimney. Let your heart rest, knowing that even in the hardest hours, ordinary people found ways to keep going. So close your eyes now. Let the darkness comfort you like a lullaby sung 100 years ago. Let the stillness carry you, slowly, deeply, into the calm. Tomorrow will come, but tonight we rest.